Hello, spookies, and welcome to Rick or Treat Horrorcast, hosted by yours ghoulie, Ricky J. Duarte. We are talking about genuinely one of my favorite, not just horror films, but favorite films of all time. And my guests today are equally as excited about it as I am. They are filmmakers, they are visionaries, they are faggots, and they are quickly gaining iconic status in the spooky gay world. Please welcome for me the boys of Monster Makeup.
Hello. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, I'm so well, fellas. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves for my listeners?
My name is Brandon Perras-Sanchez. I'm one of the co-creators of Death Drop Gorgeous and Saint Drogo, and I'm part of the Monster Makeup production company.
I am Ryan Miller. I'm one of the co-directors of Saint Drogo. Also worked on Death Drop Gorgeous, our previous film. I'm mainly the tech guy, do the editing and sound and stuff like that.
And I'm Mike Ahern, also co-creator of Saint Drogo and Death Drop Gorgeous, and a member of Monster Makeup Productions.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. I was introduced to you by our mutual friend, Roman Kimienti, who designed the sound for Death Drop Gorgeous and Saint Drogo. Really wonderful, hell of a guy. Recently on my podcast, we talked about Fade to Black just a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's awesome. We love Roman.
We met him at Salem Horror Fest, kind of inadvertently through Linnea Quigley in a weird way.
Cool.
Yeah, our friend
As
Devin,
you do.
Oh yeah, our friend Devin, who helped with scoring Death Drop Gorgeous, and he's in Drogo as well too. He's been in a lot of really great bands, and one of his he's in a band called Sextrament, and Linnea Quigley's in one of the videos. And he was like, "Do you guys want to come down and meet Linnea?" We're like, "Fuck yeah, 100% at Salem Horror Fest." Went down to meet her. We just kind of hung out with them, and then we ended up going to like this Kodo sushi place that's like they have like bands play and like kind of like synthy goth nights and stuff. And then we met Roman there. We started chatting, and he told us he did sound. So we contacted him a year or two later, and he was very interested and loved the movie. He's been like one of our friends ever since. He's an awesome guy.
That's incredible. Yeah, I met him. Just all the gay horror nerds in New York seem to know each other.
That's awesome.
It's not a huge community, but it seems like y'all are in Providence. It seems like there's a bit of like a spooky gay community going on. Is that so?
Spooky gay and straight. It's just huge here. I'm not sure it's like just a New England thing. I know Boston has a huge horror community too, but yeah, Providence has a lot going on. We have like PVD horror, a lot of local filmmakers making crazy shit, a lot of horror vendors. It's pretty awesome here.
That's terrific. Yeah, I mean, it exists in New York, and the people who are involved are really, really wonderful people. I feel like it's kind of very spread out at times, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you came onto the scene 2020. Death Drop Gorgeous is unleashed upon the world, and it's instantly embraced. It has a cult following, a cult status. Talk to me about the inception of this project. And all right, let me preface this. I am writing my very first screenplay, and I'm an actor, and I'm a singer, and I'm just gonna fucking star in my own movie. So yeah, maybe include that in your process as well, for me and for my listeners.
Yes, when I moved to Providence, I met this person named Victoria Delpy, and she's also another horror person. She's a horror author, and then I met her brother. And so one time we were hanging out, and we started chatting about like how these sex apps, the Scruff and Grinders, are just like serial killers could easily use those to like lure in victims. I think horny gay men skip a lot of red flags and will meet guys anywhere. And so we just kind of were joking around with this concept, and then year later, like for some reason, I had brought up with Mike, and Mike was just kind of like, "Hey, let's make this into a movie." So me and Chris and Mike and my partner Ryan all met at a local bar. We started chatting about it, and then brought in Wayne Gonzalez onto the project as well. And the five of us just kind of sat around, drinking heavily for a year and creating this screenplay.
Yeah, it was definitely powered by Maker's Mark, and also the general, at the time, distaste for the horror we were seeing. I think that was part of the motivation, was to write something that we weren't seeing and that we found entertaining and also disgusting at the same time.
You think Bud Light is going to make you gay? Wait till you try Maker's Mark.
I have had some gay experiences involved with Maker's Mark in my life, for sure. Reasons I don't drink anymore. You guys accomplished what you set out for with this movie. Big time. It is funny and disgusting, and it moves at an excellent pace, and you were able to find some excellent talent for it as well, including appearance by Linnea Quigley herself. Which is great. You just kind of, oh shit, that's Linnea Quigley.
Well, it's funny. Like we were like hanging out with her in her hotel room with Devin, and like this was actually the second year. We went 2 years in a row. And the second year is when we had the movie out. We're like, we have to Linnea Quigley in this movie somehow, some way. And so we had that scene with Wayne getting into the ride share. And so we were up in the hotel room. I was like, Linnea, can we film you for a scene in the movie real quick? And she like didn't even question it. She's like, yeah. She's like,
she was just like, let me put on some red lipstick real quick. So she goes to the bathroom and just like puts some on, and then she's like, all right, let's go. So
did she put it on like she does in Night of the Demons? Or
oh yes. Well, she put it through her nipple at the end too, which is interesting. But
yeah, I always wondered if that was a practical effect.
No,
it's in the director's cut.
Sure. That's terrific. I just ran into Barbara Crampton, her co-star in what's it called? Yeah, I was at the Tribeca Film Festival at a Mike Flanagan talk back, and I just look over and she's like staring at me weirdly, and then I creeped her out with the face that I made, and she walked away.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, so Death Drop Gorgeous is a hit, and it is embraced. And what is your response to that happening?
When we first made this movie, we thought it was just going to be like just a YouTube classic. Like we just wanted to have fun and make something like just silly and stupid, like this John Waters, like gory filth. And then like, as we started filming, our actors really brought it. Like we were rewatching all the footage. We're like, Jesus Christ, this is like turning out way better. Like Payne St. James especially really just elevated what we were doing. So I felt like we all kind of like we owe it to her for the amount of effort she's putting in to maybe like up our game. So like early on, we're just like, you know what, this has the potential to be something better than we thought it was. So we really just kind of shot for the stars and just aimed high and just did the best we could, and ended up with this product. And then Mike had messaged Sam from Shudder about it, and he had watched it and really enjoyed it. And the rest is kind of history from there, as we're able to like find a home for it. And then it's been getting well received. I think like it's been kind of picking up steam as of recent. So I think every year there's more and more people like laying eyes on it, and it's that's been kind of fun.
Yeah, it is fun. I feel like especially during Pride, every like couple weeks or there's just like a new person that's like finally getting around to watching it and appreciating it, which is nice. So the momentum, similar to like actually kind of filming, the momentum just sometimes like keeps building for us, which is exciting.
That's terrific. It's really inspiring. I have to say, like I mentioned, as someone who is planning to make my first movie and who has also, all right, I write film reviews for Room.org and a website called Spoiler Free Reviews, and they're not all great, And so, I do for my work have to sit through some not great cinema, and it has me thinking, okay, if this can get funded and if this can get produced, why can't I? Right. So what do you have any tips for kind of getting that ball rolling?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were talking about Providence a little earlier, and I think that we are lucky in the sense that the interconnectedness and the smallness of Providence definitely lended to getting the movie like off the ground. We have a tight-knit community, and myself, Brandon, and Chris, who's the other co-creator of Death Drop, all had plenty of years of experience working in the nightlife. So we had those connections and we knew those people. And we called in a lot of favors, and almost every place said yes, which was nice. So using your community, immediate community, is like one of my first suggestions for filmmakers who want to like start off in our smaller budget, low budget stuff like us. And just making sure that collaboration is key in the process. I think I wouldn't have been able to achieve anything without the rest of these guys. So I think those are my two main ones. And that things always take so much longer than you think they're going to. It's another piece of advice.
Like, I don't know, sitting down to actually type up a fucking screenplay.
There you go.
That's terrific. All right, so your new film, Saint Drogo, is fucking incredible. You were generous enough to share a screener with me, and I enjoyed it. It is a vast departure from the tone of Death Drop Gorgeous. What brought you to that decision?
I think we just wanted to, I don't know. We wanted to switch it up, almost instinctively. I don't know that it was like a huge discussion. I think that generally speaking, like Brandon and myself and Ryan prefer a darker horror, and we kind of just wanted to challenge ourselves and make something that was like unnerving and uncomfortable. And I think it would have been fun to do like a Death Drop 2-esque type of thing, but it would have been almost not challenging maybe for us. Yeah.
And we had we had a cameraman on board now too. Our friend Kevin Bowden, he scored a good chunk of Death Drop too. And I think we were like excited to kind of have some responsibility taken off our plates, even though we still were doing a lot ourselves in the set of St. Drogo. We only had like a crew of 5, so like even like while we're all acting, we're doing other stuff. But it was like kind of like, you know what, we have this this beautiful landscape to film at. We have someone with actually like really great camera equipment who's done this before, knows what they're doing. So we were kind of excited just to kind of jump on something that was a little bit more cinematic, a little more like brooding and like just darker.
I'll also say that like Brandon and Mike are both like creative people. I mean, I always sort of like joke that I do like tech stuff because maybe that's where I'm more comfortable, and they're like sort of creative engines that are writers and think about stories and that sort of thing. And I think that like they both have like so many sort of like thoughts and ideas about things that they might want to do, that it would feel a little bit like you said, not challenging ourselves, but also maybe like a little boring in a way, at least at the time, to like just replicate that and do the same thing again. And so Mike had always wanted to do like a horror movie in a sort of a desolate coastal town in the winter. And it's a beautiful sort of setting. And I think Brandon, also had an idea along those lines, and so sort of created the skeleton for it. And then we all came together to write it. So yeah, I mean, I think it just sort of like naturally happened in a way that we were all sort of excited about.
That's excellent. The film makes gorgeous use of this desolate coastal seaside town in the winter, taking place in P-Town. And it's, man, it's just stunning to look at, but it's not just visually gorgeous. I had an unexpected emotional reaction at the climax of the film. I won't say what it is because of, people haven't seen it yet, but you know what I'm talking about. And it just hit me in a way that I did not see coming. And I really believe that you accomplished something magnificent there, and it's worth the build that it takes to get there. And I think at such a succinct runtime, to be able to get to that tone so successfully it's a very impressive feat. Truly.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Yeah, we had someone pass out during the end.
That's terrific. I love that. Yeah. That's great. That's how you know.
I think something that adds like emotional weight to St. Drogo is the score, which was done by my friend Chris, whose musician name is Gem Club. And we always entrusted him to make something great, and also knowing that his music is very depressing. And so some things like sort of like when we were watching the climax, we had a song put in that, and we were just like, oh my God, this makes it so much sadder. This is just so much more depressing. And it's been like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's rewarding to watch people cry, but it feels validating.
It's rewarding.
that that it hits people. It makes me feel good. It makes us feel good. That people have like an emotional response to it, because I think a lot of the dynamics and a lot of the anxieties come from very real places that we've all experienced as gay men.
And I'll also say that both, so I edited it, so I knew kind of what was coming in a way that I guess other people on our team didn't. And I was like, oh man, yeah, like this is sad. But then they hadn't seen like a finished cut yet. And so when we all watched it, they basically had the same reaction that you did. Like both Brandon and Mike were like, man, like that's a lot sadder than I thought our story was going to be.
Yeah.
But I think it like works. It works in a way that's like impactful and like beautiful, but like haunting. So yeah, we were happy with the way it turned out.
It also stems from the performances as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so like it's funny, like we wrote this during COVID and filmed most of it during COVID, and like we were just reduced to having a very small cast and crew. So like if we did have people read for our roles at first, but then like when everything happened, we're like, you know what, like we're not gonna be able to like legally pull this off with the amount of people we'd have on board if we had people read for the roles. So Mike and I jumped on to do them, and we had Mike has acting experience from the past. I have very little bit from like Death Drop and some just random shit before that, but like we were like, let's just fucking go for it. And the nice thing about like having such a small cast and crew and having the filmmakers play the roles is like we kind of know like what we're looking for anyway. So I think it kind of inadvertently saved some time for us too.
Yeah.
So it was wild. It was fun. Yeah, actually, what I was gonna say is a spoiler, so never mind. So I'll stop there.
I think that's another, I guess, piece of advice that kind of ties back to like micro budget, low budget filmmaking is like utilize the folks that are already involved in the project. Like it would have been cool to have, because there's only a crew of 5 of us at most times, sometimes even just us 3 and one other person. It would have been like, it would have been less stressful to have like maybe a couple actors play these roles, but also like Brandon was saying, it was COVID. We all lived together, and I don't know that in good faith we could have people like freeze on a beach with 30-degree weather as it's raining and make them like half naked. So Brandon did that instead.
Thank you for doing it, Brandon, from an audience member.
Oh, no problem.
I think also in terms of acting, that especially for like their roles, I mean, one, like, we've all been friends for years, and so I think that might help with like acting off of each other and playing off of each other, but also like, going back to the sort of thing that people say of like write what you know. I think that we sort of did that with both of our movies, in different ways. And I think with this one, it was like a lot of the story that and the dialogue that like Mike ended up writing were thoughts that he had in previous relationships and things that sort of like he had dealt with. And so he sort of shaped those characters in ways that like were meaningful for him too. And so then I think when it came time to like act, I don't want to speak for him, but I think that it's like being able to draw from that like well of personal experience when you're acting also helps a lot.
And it also helps that I've had these 2 to like vent to, so they know relationship woes. So I think Brandon knew who I was referencing when he was playing Caleb, or certain moments that I was referencing. And so I think that's how, I think that just only played to the strength of like the dynamics and where we're drawing from.
That's incredible. And visually, special effects and makeup effects in this movie are absolutely beautiful. Let's go there for a minute.
Yeah, so we had Joe Castro did the majority of the effects. We had a little bit of help from Scott C. Miller, helped with some of the facial prosthetics, with some of the teratoma design. But Joe Castro just really knocked it out of the park. He's been doing it forever. Really nice guy. Him and his partner came from LA and helped with the effects. And like we gave Joe a pretty detailed list, like what we were looking for the effects, and he like everything he created was like pretty on par with like what we're looking for. Helped him out a little bit with like I guess eyes is a very trademarky thing with special effects people. So he's like, I need to know like specifically what you're looking for, so I'm not ripping someone off, so I can say that you referenced it. So I had him look at a bunch of eye injuries for Drogo's eyes, because they're pretty gross. Our friend Naoki, who's now Ava Unit 1, Naoki from Death Drop, designed the headpiece for the Drogo character too. So we just had a lot of really talented people on board.
Yeah, I think something that we as Monster Makeup never want to skimp on are the practical effects, and making sure that even if we change like the tone of a film, we're still going to give you something gross and lots of blood.
That's a guarantee.
Yeah, I think that's really respectable. Practical effects just land better, they just always do, especially on a lower budget, right? If you go CGI on a lower budget, it's gonna take you right out of the movie every time.
Right.
What is on the horizon for Saint Drogo and for Monster Makeup?
Sure. We're just sort of beginning our festival run for Saint Drogo. Depending on when this podcast will be released, we'll be in August in a few festivals, both Cinema Q in Denver and Popcorn Frights. We're part of their virtual lineup too, so folks in the US can buy a ticket and watch from the comfort of their homes. And then we'll be going to Cinema Q in Denver, actually. And then we're hoping to get some handful of other fests throughout the fall and into the winter. So that's currently
for a fantastic fest.
yeah, that's currently where we're at. And And then do you guys want to talk about the next movie?
Sure, sure. So, during the time we wrote Drogo, we wrote a second film or third film called Queen of the Rats, and it's kind of tonally somewhere in between the two. It's not as like bleak and dark as Drogo, and it's not as like low budge and camp as Death Drop. But this one it's about so back in Providence, the early thousands, we had this like thriving artist warehouse scene here, and it was just these warehouses full of you name it, like metal bands, punk bands, installation art, like DJs, parties, like literally every night. It was just like this wild utopia. It's actually the reason like why me and a bunch of my friends moved to Providence is because of this actual scene. And it also had a weird symbiosis with the mafia and a lot of like um, money laundering and weird things keeping these places open and the cops away. So for a while, this scene kind of existed. So this movie takes place during all of that, and then it also includes a gigantic Lovecraftian monster. And the main character is a band, or the main characters are a band. So it's going to be pretty interesting. Somewhere like Green Room meets like Sopranos meets Little Shop of Horrors, somewhere in there. But we're going to try to like up the gore and the grossness in this one like by 10 if we can.
That's incredible. That's super exciting. Wait, is it a musical?
No, no.
Okay, because my movie is a musical. So if it was, I was going to have to ask you guys to back down.
There will be songs, but yeah, it would, yeah, not a musical, just very loud noise rock.
Great. Sounds like my scene. I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's terrific. Well, listen, listeners, as soon as you are able to, please see St. Drogo and then tell your friends about it. I think that queer cinema needs more of this. It's great, not just representation of gay characters, but how gay characters live and how gay characters love. And, you know, it's a lasting film.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Absolutely.
People I think people underestimate like word of mouth and like how important it is, especially kitty. Sorry. Oh, so cute.
He knows.
Spreading the word is so appreciated by us. It makes such a difference. And yeah, so any sort of outreach like that is very helpful, especially for people who don't have a marketing budget.
Sure. Yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah. What's that?
Well, all right. Listen, there's a point in my show when I love to talk about recent horror that me and my guest hosts have consumed. It can be video games or books or music or podcasts or anything. So we're just going to start from left to right on my screen. Brandon, do you have anything to recommend?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, so what I do recommend is I know everyone knows about like all the recent queer horror. I'm assuming like Outwaters and Horror in the High Desert 1 and 2 and Skinamarink and Alice's 2 movies, T-Blockers and Bad Girl Boogie. I'm guessing most people are privy to this stuff. I hope they are. But like my recent horror watches that I've really enjoyed were the Unfriended Part 2, the Deep Web film.
Okay.
We watched this on a whim, and I almost shut it off after 15 minutes because a bunch of like Gen Zs being Gen Zs, and I was like starting to lose my shit. It's literally a Zoom call. The movie takes place. It's like one continuous hour and a half. Like it's like a slice of life kind of thing. It's happening right the fuck in front of you. And as the plot kind of unfolds, it's like very insidious and it just kind of slowly happens. I was blown away on how they, first of all, coordinated the entire thing via Zoom calls and like the videos are showing how everything goes. But it got like really wild and intense and dark, and it was like a pleasant surprise. And Ryan put it on Tubi. I never would have watched it. The first one I thought was decent, but it was pretty awesome. I was pretty blown away by it, and it was actually kind of creepy and gross in some parts too. So that was fun.
Love creepy and gross.
Not like super gross, but like just the griminess of what was happening was just kind of like, oh god, this is fucked up. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. Brian, what about you?
Recently, there were a couple of older films, I think like 80s, maybe one was even like, yeah, I think they were both 80s.
They're both 80s.
Dead of Winter and The Caller.
Same year.
What is it?
Same year of 87.
Oh, they're both 87? Okay, yeah. So Dead of Winter and The Caller, I really enjoyed them just because they were both so like unique and weird. The Dead of Winter was a little less weird, although it definitely was weird. It was just such a unique plot. It's I don't want to give too much away. The acting was good. It's just something that like story is like, I'm a sucker for a good story, and I feel like so many movies now, it's like they're polished and they have, you know, this and that going for them, like whatever, but they're telling a story that some variation of a story we've all seen like a million times. So when you have like some just like odd, unique storyline and plot line that you're like, what the fuck is this? And not even in like a weird, like, you know, dreamlike logic way, but just like you're seeing just like this very specific thing play out that you've never seen. I really enjoy it. So that one was great. And then The Caller is even more bizarre. It's one that you need to stick with if you watch it. It plays out like a stage play in the beginning because it's only two actors. The dialogue is great. It just completely dependent on the dialogue. But it's a cat and mouse type of thing where you're just like trying to figure out what the hell is going on here, who the bad guy is. The suspense is ratcheting up, and then you'll never see the ending coming. And it sort of helps you make sense of like everything in a way that's really fun. So,
oh, can I give one more shout out? Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah.
So we have a local filmmaker named Brian Pollan who's been making horror movies forever. He had his claim to fame with Bone Sickness, and it got into like Blockbuster in Hollywood Video before the whole thing shut down.
Wow.
We recently got been kind of like chatting with him, and like he's awesome. But we watched some of his like newer films, and we watched one called Cryptic Plasm. He does all the special effects himself. They're gnarly. It's like splatterpunk film. It's fucking gross, but very DIY filmmaker. He's like the MacGyver of like special effects and splatterpunk, super low budget. But Cryptic Plasm, it's if you go on their eBay page, is Morbid Vision Films. You type in Cryptic Plasm, you'll see it. But like, holy fuck, it's great. All those movies are pretty gnarly. If you're into like gross splatterpunk, like it's up there. Highly recommend.
I love that. Gross splatterpunk is my vibe. Mike, what about you?
Oh man, I've been unfortunately neglecting some horror lately for some reason as I'm looking through my letterbox right now. I did watch The Caller though, so I will echo that. I think what was been interesting about low budget horror today is a lot of things take place in a single setting, involve minimal characters, and so to see something like The Caller, which like Ryan said had two characters, Malcolm McDowell's one of them.
Oh wow.
And it's I am also a sucker for like quick wit dialogue and something that kind of keeps you guessing, and it did work like a stage play but in a way that kept me engaged and kept being like, what the fuck is going on? And it seems to be getting a little bit of like notoriety like later in the game. So I definitely recommend The Caller. I also recently, and I know this is not technically horror, but there's some like very horrific aspects. I recently rewatched No Country for Old Men.
Oh yeah.
I'm a big fan of Cormac McCarthy. I haven't read all of his things, but like if you want a good horror Cormac McCarthy book besides The Road, Child of God, which is actually sort of has similar energy to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's also very horrific and terrifying. And watching No Country for Old Men and Javier Bardem and that Lego hair wig is horrific enough, but just the I don't know, a good Western horror always kind of gets me. So I would recommend a revisit of No Country for Old Men.
Excellent. Yeah, the Dorothy Hamill haircut is it was a choice. It was definitely a choice.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Ryan, is Dead of Winter, is that the one about Nazi zombies?
No, not that one. Although I think is that the same title?
Dead Snow.
Dead Snow or
Dead. No. I'm thinking of one from the 70s. Oh well.
I think there are a couple of other movies called The Dead of Winter there might be another one that you're thinking of. This one involves a woman actress trapped in a mansion, and I don't want to go and
it has what's that actor? There's a famous actor and Roddy McDowell.
Oh cool.
Yeah,
he's always great.
Yeah,
excellent. All right, my recommendation. So I got to go to the advanced screening of the new A24 Talk to Me.
Oh yeah. And
holy shit, it's really cool.
Nice.
It's getting a lot of buzz, it's getting a lot of praise. I love A24. I'm going to be honest, the movie ended and I legitimately thought it had like another 20 minutes ahead of it. Like I thought that the climax was like the rising action and the ending makes sense. Like it's not a bad ending. I was just like, oh, I guess everyone's standing up now. I guess it's over. But it is, these two filmmakers they started on YouTube and this is not a YouTube film. It's very well made. It's gorgeous to look at. It's spooky and some really great makeup effects. I recommend it. I really do. I don't feel like I was let down. It's just maybe wasn't what I expected it to be, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like A24 does a good job of that. Like even Bodies, 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 I feel like I watched the trailer and I was like, I don't know about this. And then I went and I watched it and I ended up loving it, but also not what I expected.
I completely avoided that movie because I can't stand Pete Davidson. And I finally watched it and I was really, by the time I saw it, the reveal had already been spoiled for me. And I was really pissed that I had waited so long because it's a fun movie.
Yeah. The reveal at the end is fantastic, I think. As just this the overarching theme of like assigning meaning to things that don't have actual meaning is just like chef's kiss. I was really
I'm a Libra. I'm really good at doing that. I was let down with Cobweb, unfortunately. Some people are a Barbie, some people are a Ken or an Oppenheimer. I feel like I'm a Cobweb, or I thought I was. And so I went to go see this movie, and it's gorgeous to look at. Art direction is stunning. Cinematography, it's just like the perfect cold, crisp Halloween look to it, flannel and rotting, festering jack-o'-lanterns in a garden, and it just worked. And Lizzie Kaplan, who is always incredible, right? This film is like, I feel like when she's playing Annie Wilkes in season 2 of Castle Rock was like her warm-up for this role. And she's kind of in a different movie than everyone else. Almost reminds me of like a later in life Joan Crawford melodrama, like when she was only getting really bad horror movies. It's kind of that, but in a really good way. Anyway, loving this movie. And then like the last 15 minutes are, I think, the biggest cinematic disappointment I've ever had to sit through, or at least it's just like someone took over the script and didn't read the rest of it and put together a really rushed and predictable and crappy ending. It was so disappointing.
I sometimes worry. And maybe it's because I generally, even though lately I haven't been, generally watch more horror than most things, but I feel like that third act is where a lot of horror movies can fall apart, especially newer ones, in a way that like unfortunately eclipse like your entire experience leading up to. Like I could think of like a handful, which I'm not going to just rattle off, but that I was loving, like Act 1, Act 2, maybe even like until the very climax, and it just is kind of like that's what you chose, like that's the direction you went in.
Just the last 3 years have been like that.
Yeah. It's hard to I understand, like with making a horror movie, you're like just trying to increase the stakes like all the way through, the tension's getting higher, yada yada yada. So how do you like execute it to like fulfill the stakes you've raised? But sometimes it just feels like no one knows how, or or someone else got a hold of that last act and changed it around.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder what studios have to do, with taking over. I mean, this was Lionsgate. I feel like they're given a little bit of freedom, right? That's not like a
Blumhouse.
I don't know. You know what it comes down to? Well, and that was the thing in my review for it. I wrote like the ending just feels like standard Blumhouse fare, Listen, I think it's up to people like us then to fix this problem and come up with some original stories to tell with killer endings.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, why don't we go ahead and get into the film we're talking today? We are talking about the 1974 masterpiece, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Let's go trick-or-treating. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is directed by Tobe Hooper. This is going to be his big like break, right? He had been an assistant director for a while, and he had worked in a documentary cinematographer as well, which I think is what really carved his eye out for the realistic look to this movie. But we're going to get into how gross and raw and real it is as we go along. It's written by Kim Hinkle and Tobe Hooper. So Tobe gets an idea while he's Christmas shopping in a department store. It's crowded people bumping into each other, and he can't get out of the hardware department. He's just trying to get out of there. And he's like, how the fuck can I get out of here? And he happens to see a chainsaw hanging on the wall. And he says, I know how I could get out of here. And that is what gave him the idea for this movie, which I love his honesty.
I
I didn't know Toby and Hooper and I had that in common.
I was going to say, having worked at Michael's Arts and Crafts for the first 7 years of my working experience, I definitely know the feeling.
Retail at the holidays is fucking disgusting. Oh my God. I'm glad you survived that. Although Michael's right now, as they're putting out their Halloween decor, is basically how I'm decorating my new apartment.
Yeah, we were, oh man. Yeah, I guess the only issue is like, what would I kill someone with at Michael's Arts and Crafts?
We have so many options. It's crochet hooks.
Crochet hooks.
Yeah.
That's okay, perfect.
Great. Well, I'm glad we solved that.
Yep, next movie.
Toby and his buddy Kim Henkel wrote this screenplay. Originally, this was actually going to be a story about trolls under a bridge, inspired by Ed Gein. Now, Ed Gein, as we all know, was a very famous serial killer. Well, I think he only killed 2 people. He was a gravedigger who collected the corpses of women in, I think, the 1940s or 30s, and kept them around his house. He made suits out of their flesh and had, like, when they found him and caught him, he had like a box full of nipples. I think he made a belt out of them. And this really happened. He inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the character of Norman Bates in Psycho, and Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. It's fucked up, you know?
And he inspired Etsy too. So.
Where do I find his shop? That belt sounds really cute. So Toby is starting with an idea about Ed Gein, trolls living under a bridge, and then he's talking to a friend of his who is like an autopsy doctor, who told him that he once made a mask out of somebody's face for a joke. And Toby, instead of being disgusted, was like, holy shit, that's a great idea.
He's not wrong.
And he decided to incorporate it. I think this is interesting because at 1974, we didn't have a lot of killers wearing masks yet, right? That's going to come, maybe 8 years later in Halloween moving forward. I think, when was Alice Sweet Alice? That had a mask.
79 or 80, I think.
Okay. Even later then.
I need to know. I love that so much.
Oh, yeah.
That's another one.
So it all comes together and he finally decides, you know what? Like, I remember these stories about Ed Gein. And so he turns this into a story about a cannibalistic family of killers who defile corpses and wear their flesh and decorate their home with it. Probably not things that they got from Michael's in the Halloween department.
But maybe.
You like a Queer Eye show, but like that.
Honestly, oh, what's your cat's name?
Lynx.
My cat's name is Renfield.
Oh,
your cat's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I think this is one of the best movies ever made. Not just horror movies, but one of the best films ever made. I think it's a perfect film. And there's maybe only 3 movies that I bestow that title on. When was the first time you all saw this movie?
I think like fifth or sixth grade.
I don't even remember when I saw it. Did we see it at a drive-in together?
Yeah, they showed it at that asylum drive-in.
Yeah, I think honestly it was a couple Halloweens ago for the first time for me at that drive-in. There's this abandoned asylum in Massachusetts that in October they'll screen 2 movies, and it was Night of the Living Dead and then double billed with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Those are 2 perfect drive-in films.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
100.
Yeah, I can't remember either exactly. I think it was actually college for me. I grew up in Oklahoma with like a religious family and occasionally got to see like horror films, but I wasn't like an avid horror fan just because my mom would have thought that was weird, even though I did enjoy them. But I think I sort of like played catch up with a lot of films once I got to college. So I think it was sometime around then.
I agree with it being a perfect film too. Yeah. I think even right down to how they marketed it, everything about it is just brilliant. It's definitely like a perfect flawless film.
When it was marketed, it was called a true story, which they kind of tried to play with the remake as well. So I saw this movie for the first time. I just told this story a few weeks ago. It might have been on Roman's episode. It was my 13th birthday party, and my birthday's in October, so I was having a Halloween sleepover party, and all the girls left and all the boys were going to sleep over and spend the night, and my mom let me pick 2 movies. So I picked Army of Darkness because Bruce Campbell looks really rippling and hot and buff on that video, the VHS cover. And then I picked Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and she knew what this movie was. I think she had seen it. She went through phases of being overly Christian and like way too lenient in the films that she would allow me. My childhood is like back and forth between Carrie White and like Michael Myers' Family and the Rob Zombie version of Halloween. There's a flip-flop there. So we turn it on, and at the first appearance of Leatherface, when he smashes Kirk in the head with the sledgehammer, we're all terrified and shocked. And this little boy who was like, America, I can't wait to join the army. He was very like, I'm sure he's like a gun-toting Trump supporter now, started crying. He was so afraid. My mom stops the movie. She says, anyone who wants to leave the room can go in Ricky's room and play video games. And Julian was the only one who got up and left, and he played Mario Kart by himself for the rest of the movie.
Oh man,
what a sucker. Yeah. All right, so you mentioned the marketing, and advertised as a true story, and that actually got it banned in a lot of places, banned in, added to the video nasties list in the UK. I believe it didn't come off of that list until 1998, and it was still an edited down version that was released to people. Actually, Tobe Hooper intended to make this film rated PG so that he could get kind of the most viewers possible to see it, which sounds fucking crazy, but this actually made it scarier because he cuts away before you actually see anything happen for the most part in this movie. He claims there's only 2 ounces of blood in it, and having watched it a few times this week, there's not much more than that. It's pretty surprising. I mean, blood on people's clothing is more excessive than blood spilling. And for a film called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, only one person actually gets killed by a chainsaw. But
I think it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I think it that I was reading that like earlier in the week, and I thought that was fascinating because I feel like one of my main critiques of horror movies now is when they cut away from stuff. But then I feel like this movie does it like in a way that works very well. Like you said, in a way that it actually backfired and made it scarier. And I wonder why it's scarier for that. This like how he managed to make that scary. But then when I see like a new franchise requel to the sequel and they just cut away from everything that's like supposed to be gross, is like disappointing.
I think it might lie in how the rest of the film is edited as well, because they purposely cut just a few frames earlier than what feels natural in a conversation or in the cut scene of a film. So there are scenes where people are talking and they'll cut away as soon as someone finishes a word, right? Whereas normally there might be a moment to let it land and then they cut away. And so you're set with this uneasy feeling of how a natural flow of a conversation might work, specifically in cinema, so that by the time it gets to these kills that are actually happening, I think it's maybe part of that unbalance in your brain.
Okay, yeah.
It's also, if you consider the content of this movie and how extreme the themes and story are, it might just be enough to not even see, it cuts away and it's shot so specifically, you imagine that you saw a meat hook go through a woman's back. You imagine you see Franklin's guts getting churned out by a chainsaw, when in fact you don't see any of that.
I think the score helps a lot too. The score is just so unnerving and just like atonal and fucked up. They did such an excellent job with literally everything. Every detail of that movie is just fucking brilliant. Like the movie looks like it smells like rotting roadkill. It's just grimy. It's grainy. It's just everything about it is just so well done.
There's so much other stuff in terms of like the set design that is so gross and disgusting, and like seeing either the aftermath of things or seeing like these rooms that these people are living in, like your disgust response is like already off the scale. So it's not like you're just relying on like a few cheap kills to like fulfill that for you. Like you're already there. So even though you might not see the exact moment of a kill in like all of its goriness, you know exactly what's happening and you're already like freaked out. So it's, yeah, does a great job of balancing that.
And all of that is in the fabric of the filmmaking process. Actually, real animal carcasses and corpses were used. At least one real human skeleton was used because it was cheaper to buy a real human skeleton than an anatomically correct fake skeleton. Same thing happened when they made Poltergeist. As you probably know, the corpses in the swimming pool were all real. So,
oh, yeah.
And then Brandon, I think you were the one who said the movie looks like it smells bad, which it actually did on set. They didn't have the budget for multiple costumes. And Marilyn Burns, early on in filming, her costumes got stolen out of the dryer at a laundromat. So she had to buy one more costume exactly like it. And that was the only one that she had. So this was a notoriously hot summer in Texas. There is one bathroom for a cast and crew of at least 30 people. The budget was supposed to take 2 weeks to film. It ended up taking 4 weeks, and everyone's working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. This movie was a labor of love that turned into a labor of hate, because there are some people who were involved in it who still hold a grudge against Tobe Hooper and what he put them through.
Oh God.
The dinner scene specifically, the actor who plays Grandpa, it took 9 hours to put that old man prosthetic makeup on him. And after that 9 hours, he said, I'm not doing that again. So you guys have to get this film scene in one time, because I'm not going through that again. So they shot that scene for 27 hours straight. And the smell, they had to black out the windows to make it look like it was nighttime in the house. And so because of that, there are no open windows. And so this heat from the lights and the Texas summer is rotting all of the meat that's on these people's plates on the table. Mix that with everybody's natural body smells, the fact that nobody can wash their costumes because they don't want to lose the blood pattern that's already on it. A lot of this movie was shot in chronological order. The actor who plays the hitchhiker, actually Edwin Neal, compared the experience of filming that dinner scene to his experience fighting in Vietnam, and actually said it was worse than being in Vietnam, because they all got to a mental place through their exhaustion. And people, they would go to the window and throw up and then continue filming the scene. They got to a place where their minds started getting fucked. And Gunnar Hansen actually admitted there was a moment where he actually felt like he wanted to kill Marilyn Burns, the actress who plays Sally, because of how just kind of taken out of themselves they were through the process of this really horrific scene.
Ooh. Oh man, part of the reason why we decided to choose the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was sort of the I'm going to say this, but I'm going to clarify the alignment in which sometimes we feel as small budget filmmakers ourselves, and we filmed Drogo in the dead of winter, 3 winters in a row, and sometimes it was 30 degrees outside, which is the opposite end of extreme heat. I remember being cold and being man, next time we're doing this in Aruba or something.
Yeah.
But now hearing the extreme heat version of it, it's we actually made out kind of easy, guys. we were in a room with rotting meat and costumes that smelled like BO. But yeah, I think that's what's so inspiring about it, but also obviously disgusting and disturbing. And like you said, people hold grudges still to this day. Thankfully, we don't hold grudges to this day, I don't think. But that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because I think it reminds me of us a little bit, and the things we put ourselves through to make art.
Yeah, especially that scene is so fucking beautiful too, and so terrifying. I'm guessing that the intensity of the heat and how crazy everyone was getting. I mean, Marilyn Burns' performance in that scene is insane. I mean, I'm guessing that a lot of that was probably just actually her losing her mind at that point.
Losing her mind and covered in injuries, because some of the blood that's on her and on her clothing is her own blood. Between running through the branches that are scratching all over her, she fell down a lot. When she jumps out the window the first time, it's a stunt double, but she injured herself when they captured the shot when she lands. She actually injured herself landing. And then when they slice her finger, the mechanism wasn't working when they were doing this. And Gunnar Hansen was fed up, hot. He wasn't allowed to take his mask off unless they had a break longer than 15 minutes. He couldn't take it off, but no one would give him a break longer than that. So he wore the mask the entire time. He just grabbed a knife and literally sliced her finger. So that's literally her being sliced open in the film. Yeah, this is why we have unions now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, listen, any more facts are just going to come through as we get into the plot. I think we should probably start talking about the plot of this film, right?
Yeah.
An hour into our podcast. All right. So we get an intro monologue from none other than John Larroquette, which I think is hysterical because he goes on to do Night Court and he's such a goofball. And here he is opening one of the most iconic and important horror films of all time. He said his payment for this film was a marijuana joint, that like he never saw a dime from it.
Oh, I love that.
There's a whole story behind the mob had like funded this movie and shorted them all money. So then when New Line Pictures picked it up in 1984, everyone finally got their payment for it, but like they didn't get paid. I think the guy who plays the Hitcher made like $28 after all was said and done.
That's where they got their real skeleton. The mob, I'm sure, was like trying to get rid of some bodies.
Some bodies.
Totally.
One hand washes the other. You know what I'm saying?
Totally. I will hold on. My fucking cat. Get down. He's been like docile all day, and as soon as I hook up the equipment, he goes nuts. All right,
you know,
she's working.
Yeah, cats know.
He knows. Oh, my light. Okay,
he's working.
He's working. Yeah, cats with jobs.
Yeah, exactly. All right, film opens with a monologue from John Larroquette.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths, in particular Sally Hardesty and her invalid brother Franklin. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare. The events of that day were to lead to the discovery of one of the most bizarre crimes in the annals of American history, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre.
While he's reading this monologue, we see the text scroll up, telling of the impending doom of these youngsters, particularly Sally Hardesty and her brother Franklin, and how had they lived to be, old people, they never could have imagined the bizarre crimes that would come upon them. And when that's over, we're just on a blacked out screen and we hear the sounds of digging and the voice of someone struggling. Sounds like it's probably the hitchhiker. That's what makes sense. And then over this, camera flashes with these distorted camera sounds. And the images, it flashes as though taking a picture of like rotten hands or rotten fingernails, teeth, or rotting corpses, and this looming score is playing through. There's not a single instrument used. They recreated sounds and played with tools that cows might hear in a slaughterhouse. And so scraping pitchforks across a table or like torturing a dulcimer, basically, clanging tools together. That's where they get this bizarre sound. And then they just fucked with it in post with the audio.
It's fucking brilliant. I love it so much. Do you have any bands in Providence I've seen do that? I mean, bands, solo noise projects. It's
Sure. There's a difference. There's a stark difference there. We hear, like on a news report, talks about grave robbers in the area of the small town of Newt, Texas. The remains are badly decomposed, and a body was wired to a large monument. And we start to pan out from this like gooey, nasty ass corpse that's kind of grotesquely displayed on top of an obelisk shaped grave. And it's holding the head of another corpse. And it's super unsettling. And over this slow zoom out of that shot, we hear more news reports and fade into our title card, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, this is the Texas Chain Space Saw Massacre. 2 words. The remake would drop the and make chainsaw 1 word. And then the shitty sequel or the shitty requel from a couple of years ago would do its own thing. I don't even want to talk about that one, guys. I can't.
It's okay. We can pretend it doesn't exist for now.
I do. That's what I do.
It's already had too much exposure.
I pretend everything after like the 4th one doesn't exist. I can't.
This is a franchise that I wish had never been turned into a franchise. 2 is fun. It's not the same movie, and that was by design. 3 is unique, and then 4 is just like, I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about 4.
4 was just a coke fueled. Someone got money from something and they did it.
Yeah, but that launched the careers of Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey. So there's that.
True.
So another reason to hate it. No, I'm just kidding.
We hear that people are visiting the cemetery, fearing that the remains of their relatives have been removed. And so we meet our hapless heroes of the film. We have Pam and Kirk are a couple. Jerry and Sally are a couple. Sally's brother, Franklin, who is wheelchair bound as well. We we basically open on a dead armadillo, which was also a real carcass. And
Oh, it was.
It was, yeah. The
I was looking at it and I was like, this is fake.
So
but maybe I was just trying to make myself feel better.
They scoured dead carcasses from vets all over the country. Actually, wait, I wrote down specifically how many animals there are. So Robert Arburns, the art director, found them 8 cows, 3 goats, a cat, multiple dogs, 2 deer, 1 chicken, and an armadillo. Those are at least the real skeletons and carcasses of animals that were in this film that were also festering under the heat of the Texas sun. Van, very like 70s, like road van. I feel like we had one of these when I was very first born. Pulls along the side of the road, and Franklin, who's in a wheelchair, is let out. They put like boards down, and he has to go pee in a coffee can. And then a like 18-wheeler drives past and startles him, and he rolls down the hill in what is shamefully a very comical shot. Not intended to be at all. And then he falls out of his chair and rolls and tumbles and tumbles. And I think this is to establish what a hard time he's going to have getting around the Texas landscape, perhaps. What are your guys' thoughts on Franklin?
It's fascinating to me the ability in which you his situation and being in a wheelchair, how you can like, it's supposed to be sympathetic, but there's so many moments where he's just absolutely aggravating. And I don't know if that was intentional, like the balance of like a sympathetic character, but also making him absolutely like, when he's describing how they kill the cows, it's like excessive. It's just like, it's disgusting and it's annoying. And so yeah, I don't know. Like, it does unfortunately read as very comical, that opening scene.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he's there. I wonder if he's just trying to break up like the normal horror tropes. We're just gonna have like a bunch of hot couples, and maybe he's just adding like that element of like giving her some sort of anchor as well, or like I don't know, there's some sort of like tie to like that, like the movie's about like the Drayton Sawyer gang family, and it's like her brother with her. I'm not sure if there's like something going on with that connection, if there's like the family thing, but I'm not really sure. It's a good question.
This movie kind of starts asking questions like that, or introduces certain things that don't quite get explained, and I like that. But yes, this one in particular, you're right, Mike. He is insufferable to be around. I could not stand to be around this person. He whines and complains and is just kind of cringeworthy to the youths these days,
Yeah.
It's a lot. But all right, so they get him back in the van and pull up to this cemetery, and it turns out, so Franklin and Sally are brother and sister, and their grandma and grandpa lived nearby. Grandpa is buried in this cemetery, so while they're on their little road trip, they decide, let's just stop by, check out grandpa's grave, make sure it's not desecrated. So they do.
As you do.
There's people milling about all over this cemetery, and it turns out that grandpa's grave was totally fine. Actually, the actor who played Franklin stayed in character, and everybody fucking hated being around him. And he and Sally could not stand each other. So this brother-sister, like, arguing that they did back and forth was, like, fueled by reality.
Yeah, I read that he was a method actor, and method actors are so fascinating.
Yeah, Paul A. Partain. And I don't know, as an actor, I don't feel like I've ever done a project where I'm I'm in character the entire time. Like it takes time to work into a scene.
Yeah.
But if you're bored, you should read about Blade and read about Misery for method acting. It's Wesley Snipes says Blade was Blade the entire time, and then it's some fun ones.
And Kathy Bates in Misery.
No, James Caan. He wasn't as bad as like Wesley Snipes, but like but
Yeah.
Kathy Bates is a stage actor, and they drove each other crazy. So and it was they actually like wanted to murder each other on set, so it helped with I think like the dynamic. So
Oh, totally. Totally. So they get back in the van and they're going to go visit the grandparents' old house. And they drive past this foul, gross smell. They have to roll up the windows. Franklin explains that it's the old slaughterhouse. Grandpa used to sell his cattle. His like the southern accent is borderline like oh god, what's her name from Streetcar Named Desire? Blanche Dubois.
Devereaux?
Yeah, Dubois.
Not Devereaux. And so he explains that they used to kill the cattle with a sledgehammer to the back of the head, but it usually didn't kill them on the first flick. And so while he's talking about this, it's interspersed with shots of the cattle at the slaughterhouse. And a lot of them are drooling. Like they look like they're fucking thirsty.
Yeah, sickly
and overheated, sickly. It's like when he said, I think he says it's hit him with a hammer and it cuts to this cow that almost looked like it's already been killed, you know?
Right.
And then you realize that it's alive. And Brandon, like you said, it looks like it smells bad.
Yeah.
Then he describes that they don't do it that anyway. Now they use this air gun that shoots a bolt into their skulls and then retracts back out. And the girls in the van protest. They don't want to hear this. Pam in particular is really, grossed out. Well, and like you said, Mike, he won't shut up about it.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. Read the room. Read the van.
I noticed this last time too. He's not even strapped in or anything. Like he is just kind of rolling around wherever the van bumps.
Wherever the van takes him.
They start to pull up on a hitchhiker. And someone says, should we pick him up? Well, yeah, he'll asphyxiate out there. He'll smell like the slaughterhouse. He's weird looking. No. And they do though. And this is a heavily replicated shot, a long shot of the van slowly coming to a stop. They remade it. They redid it in the remake. I just watched a Venezuelan horror film that completely shamefully ripped this movie off, and they used it. And hitchhiker kind of runs maniacally, like
it's very.
I would not look at
this
guy. Yeah, I would not look at this guy and think I'm going to let him into my vehicle. Have you ever picked up a hitchhiker?
I have never picked up a hitchhiker, and I would never do it. Brandon, have you?
Back in Burlington, I lived in Burlington, Vermont. I did a few times; it was totally fine. But then my last straw was when I was living in Rhode Island, and that's a whole crazy ass story. So do not pick up hitchhikers. Oh my god! Let's just say this lady must have found a broken down car and stood by it, and I thought it was her car, and was not. And the story's insane.
Is that the plot of your fourth movie?
No, but like I made her throw her purse, everything in the back, and the first thing she says to me is, "I'm not gonna kill you. I'm not gonna kill you." What's happening? So yeah, and it was not her car, and so yeah.
Great. Well, I wasn't gonna do it before. I'm not gonna do it now.
It involves motels and throwing a purse out the window and
leaving her there.
It's insane.
Jesus.
I was gonna get stabbed like a sharpened toothbrush or like a Barbie leg or something. I don't know what the fuck was happening.
Damn. All right. So they pick him up. And I think Franklin mentions, I think we just picked up Dracula. He's fucking weird. He's in like the back of the van, like kind of sitting like almost cross-legged, and everyone's toward the front and they're just staring at him like he's Dracula. And he's giggling and he's got this very prevalent birthmark on the right side of his face. Tells him they're headed south, brings up the slaughterhouse. He says that, like, he was coming from the slaughterhouse, which is just red flags left and right, guys. My brother worked there, grandfather too. My family's always been in meat. He got this role because he based his audition on his nephew, who was a fucking like 5-year-old boy who wouldn't shut up about things.
Huh. This is like great because like I could now that you're saying that, I could definitely see that.
That provides clarity, because I just remember watching it and just being like, these are loud choices, not in a way that wasn't working, but in a way that I was like, this is a very specific specific choices.
It worked really, really well too. Jesus, that's awesome.
It did. I think it's cool that all three of the family members have extremely different personalities. And I guess we'll talk about Leatherface's take on it a little bit later. Gunnar Hansen's on his. So he pulls out these pictures of slaughtered animals that he's been taking. He's got like this massive old-timey, maybe Polaroid camera with a giant flash bulb on it around his neck. He's also got a satchel made out of a dead animal around his neck. And red flags, pulls out pictures and starts showing to them and talking about how those bolt guns are terrible because people lost their jobs, right? They didn't need people to run the sledgehammers anymore because they had these bolt guns. I think this movie's interesting because it talks so specifically about what's happening in the world at this time. I am a big proponent. I really firmly believe that the horror genre, more than any other genre, reflects the zeitgeist of what's happening in the world at the time that it's made. Right.
Yeah.
Night of the Living Dead, you've got civil rights, you've got this film, post-Vietnam, kind of like cynical, jaded youth who kind of feel like they can get away with anything. Gas shortage. I just think this film was so successful because it held a mirror up to people who hadn't seen their reflection cast in that way before. Perhaps.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like there's another reason why I love doing this movie. I feel like that's also aligned with a lot of things we try to do when we make movies, is sort of hold a mirror up to the community and just like have a little moment of reflection. And so it's something I love about that. I think horror does that really well. And just even those opening news broadcasts, not to like bring it all the way back, I was just like thinking like how scary it was then and how scary it is now, and how like what horror is making now is going to look like in a few years.
Totally. It's I think we have glimmers of hope popping up. It's not all bad. A lot of it, we're getting more and more interesting stuff.
For sure.
So and then the loss of jobs and kind of industry taking over is also a big aspect of what this guy's talking about. He talks about how they make head cheese out of the heads of this cattle by boiling it, except for the tongue, because obviously you can eat the cow tongue. And after they boil it, they scrape all the flesh away and the bones, and they use the jowls, the muscles, the eyes, ligaments, and everything, the nose and the gums, and make a big like vat of jelly out of it. So sometimes it's called head cheese, which was originally the title of this film. Before, at the very last minute, that was changed. Head cheese can be sliced as a lunch meat, or it can be a jelly that's like spreadable.
What can it do?
It can't satisfy my appetite. That's what
for sure. I was eating like a burrito bowl as I was watching this, and like I just as the head cheese came, I was like, I'm just not hungry anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that did it in for you.
We were eating butterscotch pudding during the intro with the drippy corpses, and I had to stop. I'm just kidding. We were not eating butterscotch pudding.
I was gonna say, man, actually, that sounds delicious. I haven't had butterscotch anything. Do they even make butterscotch? I feel like salted caramel took over the butterscotch market.
I don't know. Those corpses on that obelisk looked like they were covered in it.
That's true. That's a great.
That's where it comes from. Little known fact: you eat in those pudding cups. That's where they get it.
Yeah,
they boil down these festering corpses and they render what's left of them.
I said to Brandon during that part that I was like, "This is the most disgusting part of this whole movie." It's like the discussion of head cheese. I'm just like, the fact that like it's called cheese, first of all, is like, just don't do that. That's disgusting. But then like, yeah, the way that it doesn't even require any like visuals. You're just talking about something that's like makes my stomach fucking turn.
Yeah.
I used to bartend at a Spanish tapas restaurant in New Haven, Connecticut. And Sundays they would have a pig roast where they would roast whole pigs and serve them. And this man would come every fucking Sunday and sit at the bar and eat the head of the pig. And I would have to watch him pick out the eyeballs and like pull the jowls off. It was literally the head of a pig cut off and cooked. Like it looked like the head of a pig.
You just tell them that week, sorry, someone else reserved the head. And like, take it out back.
Can you eat that in the bathroom, please?
Yeah, like what?
Yeah, that was
Go to
bad.
your car.
So bad. I hate the service industry.
I thought bears eating fudge at the Providence Eagle was gross.
Yeah, it is.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Sounds like the Providence Eagle is a little more wild than the New York one.
Oh, the stories I have.
Me too. I used to be a go-go dancer at the Eagle back in my youth.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Those were the days. All right. So speaking of changing the subject, Pam wants to change the subject. She can't listen to this anymore. And the hitcher, so Franklin's been digging his, like cleaning out his fingernails with he's got a knife that is his own. And the hitcher just takes it out of his hand and the tone changes completely. and everyone's in complete silence. And the hitchhiker has this like fucking like just weird giggle going on, and this the worst smile you can possibly imagine. And he takes this knife and he slices across his palm with it, and no one knows what to do. There are like screams, but it's not quite panic. And in the background we hear this old-timey country song playing on the radio, which I think is fucking brilliant, right? There's no like scary like instrumental music, it's just awkward.
Yeah.
Everyone's silent. And then so he gives the knife back to Franklin. And then he pulls out a straight razor from his sock and he says, I have this knife. It's a good knife. No one knows what. Now it's even worse because now they know he's carrying his own weapons, right?
Yeah.
He takes the Polaroid and he starts aiming it around, and he lands on Franklin and takes a picture of Franklin, and he's giggling. And Franklin's like, he took my picture. Like, what the fuck? Hitchhiker says, you can drop me off here. This is my house. This is my road. And Kirk's like, we're in a little bit of a hurry, guy. And then he invites them to dinner. He says, you like head cheese? My brother makes it real good. You'll like it. And it's building worse and worse and worse. And he peels the protective paper off of this old-timey Polaroid, shows it to Franklin, who comments that it didn't look so good, didn't turn out so good. And then the hitchhiker asks for payment. He says, like, it's a good picture. $2, which I looked up is $12.38 now. I have this thing where like I like to know inflation prices.
Yeah.
And they refuse. And I have to comment, I think that this entire film would have ended differently if people just paid artists what they deserve. I think that's the lesson that we need to learn from it.
That's definitely, yeah. Lesson 1, I think, is don't pick up a hitchhiker. Lesson 2 is pay artists what they deserve.
I mean, this is how Ann Getty has got her start.
With babies, totally. They refuse to buy the picture, so his like smile kind of fades away, and now he looks real sinister. And out of his little like dead animal satchel, he pulls wadded up foil, like tin foil, and unrolls it, puts the picture in it, puts like black powder on top of it, and lights it on fire. And it's like some kind of incendiary powder. I don't know anything about pyrotechnics. And this sets everybody screaming. Like, this is the final straw. They pull the van over, they kick his ass out, and he's screaming and yelling, arms waving. The van's pulling away, and he's running alongside of it, banging on the window, and he's blowing raspberries at them, which is a weird but really cool character choice, I think, because he does it throughout the film, you know? And he starts smearing the blood on the van. And Franklin's crying because his arm is bleeding because he was sliced open. And Jerry comments, that's the last goddamn hitchhiker I ever pick up. For some reason, Pam decides to start reading horoscopes. Now, a little bit earlier in the film, she was reading from this book about the zodiac and talking about how Saturn is in retrograde, and Saturn is an evil planet. Like, it's not a good planet, and it's even worse when it's in retrograde. So Franklin's horoscope is like, travel the country, long-range plans, and upsetting persons around you could make this a disturbing and predictable day. The events of the world are not doing much either to cheer one up. And then she reads Sally's horoscope, and she says, oh no, she's a Capricorn that's ruled by Saturn. So we've got this like evil planet in retrograde that rules Sally's like zodiac sign specifically. And her horoscope is, there are moments when we cannot believe that what is happening is really true. Pinch yourself and you might find out that it is. I think this zodiac use is one of those things that the film introduces but doesn't follow through with. That's super interesting to me, because it's not a zodiac movie. This isn't a supernatural movie. It's not a witchcraft movie, but there's kind of elements in all of that lining up.
Yeah, I love how also times have not changed. Like we're still talking about when planets are in retrograde. I thought that, I don't know, I think that's fascinating.
No, because now Mercury in retrograde is the one everybody bitches about,
right? Yeah, that's the one that I think happens more frequently and is what's supposed to like throw us off more.
I don't believe in the zodiac until I believe in the zodiac. Like, I'll use it as an excuse. Like, if I'm dating someone who's just not showing up for me, I'll be like, oh well, he's a Capricorn, that's why. You know?
Yeah.
So someone had said one time that they consider Texas Chainsaw Massacre a folk horror, and which I could see how that works. Yeah. I'm curious if it's supposed to like kind of be like the juxtaposition of like city life and city people believing in the zodiac versus like country living, where I feel like those people are more like into very, very different ways of life that aren't zodiac based. It's more like like the Farmer's Almanac-y, like local folklore, like I don't know. Like I'm curious if they're trying to create some sort of like division there. If it's what I want to say, it's like a privilege thing, but more just like the difference between like the city folk versus the country folk. I don't know.
No, I think that's a great observation. Totally. And I think Toby Hooper and they put together the script with specific points like that, you know, because he admittedly let kind of what's going on in the world influence the choices that he made in telling the story. I think that's a really cool theory. All right, so they pull up to a gas station and there's a weird old country bumpkin staring at the sun outside the gas station.
There always is.
There always is. The man who runs it is this, he's credited as old man. That's just it. And he tells him, I don't have any gas, right? There's also a gas shortage in the 70s. I don't have any gas, and it's probably not going to arrive until later today, probably tomorrow. And they start inquiring about the Franklin place. So Franklin's name is Franklin. He's named for his grandparents' namesake, I suppose. And the old man tells him, like, you don't want to go up there. You don't want to go bothering folks around here. Don't really like when you get on their property. And they decide to do it anyway. He tells them, I've got some good barbecue here. The gas transport will be here after a while. Just stay around here. And they decide not to. So Sally gets out of the van to get a Coke, and on her way back, she notices that the blood on the side of the van that the hitchhiker has smeared has like a specific pattern. And she just remarks, like, it's kind of a casual remark, hey guys, it looks like he was trying to write something. So Jerry goes in to ask if there's another gas station, answers nobody, comes back with some barbecue for everyone, which Franklin starts eating. Sally wants to borrow his knife just to check it out because it's got some blood on it. So Franklin's super worried. Like, why did he blow up my picture like that? Do you think it was something that I said that upset him? And it's kind of comic relief a little bit because he keeps harping on it, and it's also fucking annoying. Just shut the fuck up, dude.
And him just eating that barbecue, it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, that was.
Is Toby Hooper a vegetarian? Like, I feel like that's. Oh, go ahead.
I read Guillermo del Toro became a vegetarian after he saw this movie.
That's awesome.
So I saw this at 13, and then I saw it again when I was about 17, and I did become a vegetarian because of this movie for about 4 years.
Oh, it's in the Lord's word.
The reveal of what this barbecue is, like, kind of shook me, I guess. And I was working at a Hamburger Mary's, a gay burger joint in Phoenix, and it was closing down, and I'd never had one of our burgers, so I had one, and I never looked back.
You know what's in those burgers, though, right?
Oh God, it's a queer hamburger joint. I can only imagine.
I mean, look, think all those RuPaul queens you haven't seen in a while. Where's penitentiary?
Sashay away into meat grinder.
Didn't Jimbo talk about sending people to the glue factory?
Yeah. So they pull up to the grandparents' house, and it's dilapidated, but it's massive. This is a huge fucking house surrounded by trees, and the interior is falling apart. The wallpaper is peeling off the floor. Franklin stays behind. He can't really move well over this terrain in his wheelchair, and he wants to check out the blood that's on the van. He can't, he's just creeped out. He can't get over it. He tries to get into the house, calls for Sally's help. He's really struggling with this terrain, overgrown paths and kind of stairs. And he finally gets in, and Kirk and Pam come down the stairs, and they want to go to a watering hole. Franklin sends them that way. So they run through a field, they're laughing and holding hands, and then they realize that the watering hole is empty. But they hear a generator in the distance, and Kirk says, holy shit, gasoline. They must be using a generator to run their electricity. So they approach the house, and it's this massive old farmhouse. They pass by a torn up tent, like a campsite, with this old blue, just kind of a sheet over a rope tent. And there are like cans hanging from a dead tree. There's a stopwatch with a nail through it. Really bizarre imagery.
Yeah.
That I think is imagery that we see a lot now in movies that I don't think you saw back then.
No, like, I view that as like, like they say, like, where time forgot or time has stopped, like the old way kind of thing. I don't know if that was a symbolism with that nail through the watch, but like I love like all the weird little images and quirks and little Easter eggs in the film. But I mean that could be totally wrong. That's kind of what I got out of that. It's
a specifically like a close up on that watch with the nail through it. So I think you're probably right. These people are
for
stuck,
sure.
Time forgot them.
Yeah.
There's something that like watching these movies that are clearly the blueprint of so many things, like even so much of the first season of True Detective reminds me of this movie when they get to the killer's house. And if you've seen the show, you know what I mean. It's that like imagery, and it's like this. It's almost just like how like what nightmarish mind thought of this shot. I think is like super effective, and I think it's like as a result affected of a lot of like Southern Gothic stuff.
Yeah.
Like going forward.
The film is so influential and copied. I mean, and also paid homage to. You look at Rob Zombie's films, right? There's clear homage to this film and other grindhouses of the time. And then you look at Ty West and X, and you see it there as well. Almost too much. Like they stop at a gas station, but in my opinion, not over the top. I think that he balances it really well with like this is clearly a Texas Chainsaw illusion, but not a ripoff. And then you see like that Venezuela movie I watched, What the Water is Left Behind, and it's like, oh, you guys just wanted to make another movie, you know. It's kind of everywhere.
Yeah, you know, it's definitely permeated. Not to like bring it back too, but I just wanted to mention that moment when Franklin finally gets in the house. There's like this quiet moment with him, and there's this beautiful shot where he's like centered in the middle of this dilapidated room, and he's not saying anything. And this is like where I was talking about earlier, this like duality of like this sympathetic character, but also having him be the most annoying fucking person in the entire cast.
Yeah,
because then he starts also blowing raspberries, and which is like the hitchhiker. That's a little like very aggravating and annoying, but also like I don't know that has something to do with the parallels of the characters. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. I just really love. There was like a shot that I really appreciated as he's rolling in, and like the screens or the windows are all blown out, and he's just by himself. That was like really sad.
It takes its time with him getting him to that location. You know, like you watch his struggle, you hear him. He can hear everybody laughing upstairs, and he's in front of. He can't go upstairs, right? And yeah, he says that like, "Come on, Franklin, it's gonna be a fun trip," and starts blowing raspberries, and then he's annoying again, and yet you do feel sorry for the guy.
Yeah, it's just I don't know, just interesting character choices that I don't know, I appreciated. Yeah, he's so annoying.
Yeah,
I think like him and the kid from Babadook should have done a spin-off series together.
Yeah, that kid. You know, and you did mention, Mike, the barbecue, and I really want to circle back to that real fast because knowing what the barbecue is later on in the film, he kind of does a like spit something out of his mouth at a point that could be like hair or something, maybe. And also, I'm just gonna be the one to say it. This barbecue looks like a dick. Like he's just got it sitting in his mouth like a cigar. It looks like a penis, and I've always wondered if that's on purpose. Like, is it actually somebody's penis? I don't think I've never had barbecue that's shaped like that. I don't need an answer. All right. So anyway, all right, back to Kirk and Pam, who they walk through this beautiful sunflower patch. They come across a bunch of rusty old cars, which is super interesting. Kirk kind of remarks about it. Then they come around to the front of the house, and we get this gorgeous gliding shot of around the house and centering behind a bench swing as they walk up the steps. And that's going to feed us into one of the most famous movie shots of all time a little bit later. But this movie, there's a lot of really great like gliding shots. They only had 40 feet of camera track. And so there were people grabbing track that had just been used and running around the camera to try to set it down in time before the camera got to where it was going later on during chase.
Awesome.
Yeah. They knock on the door and no one answers. And then Kirk finds a human tooth on the porch. He hands it to Pam as like hey, Pam, I got something for you. And she's obviously disgusted. And she says, let's go. And she walks away. And then Kirk opens the door. He calls in, hello. And Pam walks out into the yard. She sits down on the bench swing. And inside this house, to the right, there's a staircase going up. And then to the left, there's a little hallway with an entryway, like a doorway in the back. And behind that doorway is a bright, bright red wall. It's gorgeous art direction, right? Looks nothing like the rest of the movie. And then skulls of various animals hanging on it.
Well, Leatherface loves an accent wall.
So as I told you, I'm like wallpapering and painting my apartment. As I'm doing this, I looked at a wall and I was like, should I just recreate this?
Oh, 100%.
That's it. Like, I mean, needs an accent wall.
Yeah, seriously. Although this apartment's turning the wall behind me is not painted yet, but every wall is turning into an accent wall here. So he enters the house and this all happens so fast. It's such a shock. He kind of starts to jog a little bit toward that back door. He hears a pig squealing and it kind of draws him forward. He trips on a ramp that leads up to this doorway. And as he trips, a massive man in like a yellow apron holding a sledgehammer and a person's skin on his face walks into the doorway. We get this incredible pan up his body from like feet to head. And then it's like it shows Kirk's shocked reaction. And before audience members can even take in what we're seeing, let alone Kirk, he is whacked in the back of the head with the sledgehammer, falls to the ground, and starts like convulsing in death throes.
The convulsing part is the most disturbing part for me. Like when his body just starts shaking, and then given obviously the cow stuff from the beginning, it's like, oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah. And that and the sound of the thud on his head. He gets whacked a second time as well to kind of finish him off. And it all happens so fast. And he is dragged through into the doorway. And then Leatherface grabs the metal sliding door and slides it shut, which is, I think that's brilliant because we didn't know that there was a sliding door there.
Yeah.
As audience members until it's there. And then it's like, oh, this is a slaughterhouse, you know?
Yeah. We were just in Vermont and we passed houses that were very not as bad as this house, but very similar in a way where I was just like, I would never go knock on that door. I would never go knock on that door. I would never go knock on that door. It's just like, the inspection almost seemed a little far-fetched to me, almost like the way he was like going in. I'm like, would you really? Would you? And it smells in that place. It smells terrible. But yeah, no, this scene is like so good. The convulsing, like I said, it's that's one of the most disturbing aspects of it, I think, for me. One of the most disturbing details.
I like in horror movies too, where it's like when the killings are realistic. Like, you watch a horror movie, someone gets like stabbed in like their side and they're like vomiting blood and die. It's like people don't die that quickly. So it's like there's more scenes in this film that are like that too. It's like the human body is more resilient than you think. So it's nice to like, it made it more like hard to watch because like, oh, that actually is probably what would go down. Like,
yeah,
it hits him a second time too. He's like still convulsing and he goes in again. It's like, Jesus. Like,
yeah, you don't see the convulsing often in films ever. That's a great point. Yeah. This, I will say Michael Myers is my favorite of the slasher icons. I'm a huge, massive Halloween fan. Leatherface legitimately frightens me. And I have had, like, I will just have out of nowhere nightmares about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and be kind of stuck in a situation like this and, can't get out. It just gets under my skin. I don't watch this movie super often because I want to preserve my reaction to it. Like I'm a musical theater nerd. There are certain musicals I won't listen to too often because I want to cry every time I see it. And so
that's like me with Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Only a couple times because I just want to cry once in a while.
Got it. Yeah. No comment. So
my camera's gone. Kirk was eye candy. Who's like the trait of the film too?
Kirk, and he's the first to go. He's like kind of the only cute one. He is.
So you have like young Howard Stern and then Leatherface. No,
I thought in the sequel to the remake, the like hunky blonde guy that they cast was maybe a callback to this guy's look. Like this guy's not as like muscly and like his haircut isn't as good, but
yeah,
I feel like it was kind of they were going for that same vibe. So Pam stands up from the bench swing, and this is kind of now renowned as one of the best shots in cinematic history because the camera is underneath the swing. She stands up and the camera glides underneath it and follows her. And this movie is dripping with shots looking up, like upward camera angles and downward camera angles, just to set us off like at ill ease because they're from angles that we don't normally see. And so the camera follows her the entire walk up to the house, knocks on the door, knocks on the screen, no answer. I think it's really interesting. She didn't hear anything that happened in there and immediately, moments after walks into the house. makes a left instead of where the sliding door is and enters kind of a dark room, maybe the dining room, and then kind of trips and falls through these curtains and is thrust into this disgusting den of like nasty chicken feathers all over the place and bones of humans. There's like a femur and a jaw. There's a foot that's attached to like a skeleton sofa, like a sofa that's decorated with bones, feathers and bones hanging from the ceiling with twine. There's like a horn through a skull, which really always gets me for some reason. A turtle shell. There's like just a turtle shell hanging. And then they've got this little basket of like just spare bones, which I only just noticed this time.
It's like goes to Pier 1, imports once.
Yeah.
There's something so tactile about this setting. It's really disgusting in a way that just like you could just like you can feel it. I don't know. Yeah, everything goes back to Brandon saying how like you can tell it smells, because I don't know, because one, it really did, but two, it's like those details like that are like in these rooms that are absolutely disgusting.
I think it looks there's something about how it doesn't look like it was set decorated with a lot of intention. It looks like they just threw shit everywhere. And my big problem with the remake was that it was so glossy.
Yeah.
And there was water dripping from places where there shouldn't be water dripping. And it was like beautiful artistic design that did not feel like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This movie just looks like they took a bunch of shit and threw it everywhere, you know?
Gives it like more of like a primitive element. It makes me even scarier. It's again like the horn through a skull, like the random like turtle shell just dangling. Like there's no like rhyme or reason to these things hanging around. It's just like a primitive brain, like these like gross, crazy people just maybe they thought that was gorgeous and stuck it up like that. It just makes it even more like just terrifying and crude.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning when Franklin was alone in the grandparents' house, he did come across a pile of bones and feathers that specifically laid out almost like a totem. There is, I think, some kind of, like you said, primitive element. Maybe not like, you know, when the hitchhiker burns that picture, it's like a curse of some kind, smearing that design to mark their van. I think primitive is, that's the word for it. For sure.
Or even like you said earlier, Brandon, folk horror. There's like I think like setting up bones in some sort of structure, and then also marking the van is like actually kind of folk horror-y.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting American folk horror, which doesn't happen a lot. It doesn't happen all the time, you know. Pam retches and she's getting sick and she tries to stand up and she's hollering and she gets to the front room and starts running toward the door, but Leatherface slides that metal sliding door open and runs toward her. And God, this shot just fucking makes me so mad because she makes it out the front door. And as soon as she does, he grabs her around the waist and picks her up and she doesn't stand a chance anymore. You know, like she's done for. He carries her into that red room and then into a kitchen. And this meat hook sequence is brilliant to me because the meat hook is in the forefront of the shot and we instantly know what's going to happen, right? And it happens faster, I think, than we think it's going to. There's no hesitation. He lifts her up and then starts to put her down and the camera pulls away at the exact right moment to a further away shot when she kind of lands on this meat hook. So we don't see it pierce her skin. We don't see it go in there. But people left this movie convinced that they had seen that happen. And that is a testament to, honestly, the brilliant editing that was by accident because he wanted a PG rating.
Right. I love that Mandela effect.
Yeah, it's exactly.
It's great. Yeah, I was watching it with my boyfriend who hadn't seen it yet. And that's when he like really started to like cover his eyes and move away, even though you don't actually see it. But it's just like thinking about it, I think, is the terrible part.
I think she lands on it with such a like a sturdy stop. Like there's no bounce, you know?
Yeah.
And that adds to it.
Yeah.
We then see a close-up of her again. There's blood splattered behind her. Not a fuck ton, though. I really do respect this film's restraint with blood because it does feel pretty real, you know? And she's kind of reaching above her and trying to like pull herself up and obviously screaming. Looks at the counter and there is poor Kirk. He's dead, laid out, sprawled out across the counter. Leatherface walks over and grabs his yellow chainsaw and revs it up. And this is the first time we actually see a chainsaw in this movie. It blows smoke out the side, which I think is a really scary and cool effect. And he cuts Kirk up right in front of Pam while she's screaming and trying to get off of this meat hook. And that's the scene. They hung her up on with like these nylon harnesses around her legs, like between her legs, and she could only stay up there for a minute of a time. And she tried to soften the pain by wrapping them in maxi pads. Yeah.
Oh,
maybe
Pam,
where all the
so
blood went.
resourceful.
Maybe where all the blood went in this movie. All right, so we cut to the others, and they're just kind of checking out the blood on the van. The sun's going down, and Jerry's like teasing Franklin. He's still super worried. And Jerry's telling him he's going to kill you. This hitchhiker's going to come and get you. I told him where you live. And Franklin's just like, he's so easily upset, you know?
Yeah. That's like another thing, too. They're just always teasing him.
They are.
Jerry,
yeah.
and Kirk was, too. Kirk was like, I don't know. But then he's also so annoying.
It becomes clear that they didn't want him to come at all.
Yeah.
You know? And Sally never says it outright. I really like the dialogue between him and Sally because it feels like brother sister who don't like each other, you know? Franklin, there's a moment where Franklin asks Sally, do you believe in all that Saturn zodiac stuff? And Sally says everything means something, I guess. And then that's the last that we hear about the zodiac, but it's planted in our minds that she's doomed because of what her horoscope said. And he just won't shut the fuck up. He's pouty. So we cut to Jerry, who has now left to look for the others. He comes upon the house. The sun is like basically set now, knocks on the door, and there's no answer. But he hears chains rattling, and he hears this like giggle / maybe a cat coming from inside. Hears weird noises and investigates. I don't understand why any of these kids hear weird noises or pigs or anything and decide I'm going to enter the stranger's house and go look for it.
No, cats with jobs.
Yeah.
Let them work.
He walks into this little red vestibule room and starts kind of observing the skulls. And then he hears a knock coming from the kitchen. He goes into the kitchen, and Pam is no longer on the meat hook, and Kirk's body is no longer on the counter. And there's this massive freezer, like the kind that's shaped like a refrigerator on its back, you know, and you lift the lid up.
Yeah.
And there's rattling going on inside, and he opens it, and Pam is in the freezer. And it's a really effective jump scare because she sits up, and the sound effects, this like awful, terrible tools being clanged together and bizarre noises. And as soon as that happens, Leatherface busts into the room. Jerry's reaction when he turns around and screams like a woman is brilliant, I think. And it's all so quick because he gets whacked in the head with a sledgehammer as well. And this sets Leatherface off. Now, Gunnar Hansen, he was given the freedom to create the character of Leatherface however he saw fit. He wasn't cast initially. And then the guy who was cast, the day they had to film, was drunk in his hotel room and refused to come out and got fired. So
that's exactly what happened with Brandon when we started St. Drogo. I'm having deja vu. I'm triggered.
Oh no. I'm glad it worked out. Glad it worked out. If it ever happens again and you need another bearded guy with arm tattoos, and just call me.
I have your number now.
Go back something you said earlier. Like, so the line is like everything means something is what she says, correct? Like with the stuff. I'm curious if like they're playing on this whole like, you know, like everything has meaning, like especially with Christianity and stuff too. And it's like, well, everything has meaning, like to put a human being through such a fucking traumatic, awful experience. I wonder if they're just kind of making fun of that. Like, does this really have meaning? Like, is this the, like, should someone go through this? So there's like an end goal for this torment. Like maybe it's kind of making fun of like modern religion or Western religion for most, I don't know, or like that.
I think that's a good read, especially, I don't know, that feels like pretty prominent because it's like, what is the meaning of this massacre? Like, how can you assign meaning to a massacre?
It makes it way darker.
I'm just going to go in, I guess, because we're kind of moving into Sally's big moments. I'm going to go into my kind of take on all of this. Sally and Franklin have roots in this neighborhood. They are literally, their grandparents were neighbors with these people, right? And now they live in another state. I think they live in Florida, maybe. And they have kind of moved on. And yet here they are back, trapped and unable to get away from this. And I have to wonder if there's commentary there of being unable to escape your roots, right? And really fighting to. That's me watching this movie multiple times this week, and like maybe over analyzing, but
No, that
Yeah.
sounds pretty spot on too. I think that has something to do with it, and just like you said, you mentioned earlier, like the dichotomy of like city folk and like the time the places like time forgot that time is stuck in,
Yep.
and sort of like socioeconomic
Hmm.
poor white Midwest.
This is amazing. I love episodes when I have filmmakers on because everything gets analyzed really, really well. All right.
We sometimes have thoughts.
Sometimes have thoughts. All right. So going back to Jerry has been struck in the head. Leatherface is now freaking out in this moment. And I love his performance here. When Gunnar Hansen was cast, he was given, like I said, freedom to portray the character however he wanted. And his take on it was that Leatherface was born mentally handicapped and was never taught properly how to communicate or how to speak. And so that's why he wears these masks. He wears 3 different masks throughout the film, and he wears these masks for specific reasons or emotions, or to portray, like convey how he feels. So the mask that he wears when he kills people is this very rudimentary, like crudely stitched together, the iconic one that we see here. And then later he wears the old woman mask when he's being more domestic and like kind of making dinner. And then at the end at dinner, he wears this beautiful woman mask. And there's a cut scene where he actually applies makeup to it, but it's interesting to watch. It's not in the film.
Oh, they should have kept that.
Yeah. Well, this and part 4 are the only two that even like comment on him maybe having some sort of gender, non-conforming aspects, right? I think that that's a really interesting. I think now maybe through today's lens, we don't need to go there because it might be vilifying that lived experience. But I do think it's interesting that the sequels never really touched on it again.
But either vilifying or just again showing like in a conservative household, you can't really be yourself unless you're sawing off corpses' faces and putting makeup on them. And
No, I like that route because I felt like this recent one from like last year had a really more conservative like angle to it. Like a townie tells the black man he should be ashamed for taking down the Confederate flag because that old woman died. Or like the guy with all the guns has to tell her, see, sometimes you need guns to kill fucking psychos. And it had this like undertone of anti progress.
Yeah. I totally forget that one. I kind of also blocked it out.
I promised I wouldn't bring it up again.
I did not forget the mechanic.
Oh no.
Wasn't he very nice to look at?
Unnecessarily hot, like distractingly hot, All right, so where the fuck are we? Oh, all right. So Leatherface based all of this on mentally handicapped characterization, and he went to schools and hospitals to observe how people behaved. He says he wrote a book called Chainsaw Confidential that's definitely worth reading. And he says that he specifically did not want to offend anybody who is mentally challenged. And it has been agreed upon that he actually doesn't, including allegedly by people who have challenges and are disabled, which I just think is kind of interesting because he provides a very real portrayal of someone who doesn't have the skills or the tools to communicate. And we see this in the scene where he's running around, looking out the window, kind of looking around to see if there are other people who could potentially escape, right? Every time he thinks he's killed somebody, then there's someone else shows up and he's starting to get frantic about it. He sits down by the window and we get this really our only close-up shot of him, like good one, where we see his eyes and we see he uses his tongue and his disgusting dentures, like his gross teeth, as acting tools, right? And I think
sort of had his photo in her hands for sure. He was smizing. Everything was on point.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Gunnar Hansen shaved his beard for this role, and then he never shaved it again for the rest of his life. He only did it for this. I think it's a really interesting, I'm not going to say sympathetic scene, but very well executed in that this is our only chance to really see who Leatherface is,
Yeah. I also wondered about, hearing that he based it a lot on folks with disabilities, and that alignment also with like Franklin. I don't know that I've decided what the film is trying to say about folks with disabilities, but there's something there, I think, with the specific detail of having like Franklin obviously in a wheelchair.
Sure.
but I don't know what they're saying.
Well, I wonder if it's like even like outcasting too. Cause like I feel like, you know, like Leatherface is kind of there, like that does all the grunt work for the family, maybe because of his disabilities, where he's not like at, you know, at the table with everybody. He's doing everything else. And I wonder if like Franklin too, it's like outcasted from his family for the handicap thing too. But it's weird.
Yeah. I almost wonder, I don't know if I should say this. I'm going to say it and I may cut it depending on how insensitive it sounds. But all right, if we're following the story of Sally and trying to cut her ties from this place and trying to escape it, her brother holds, this is going to sound bad. She's held back by the limitations of her brother, right? To the point that like she would not have escaped had he not died. And I have to wonder if it's a little bit of a commentary on like, you just have to give it all up and you just have to go.
Well, there's a thing called like palliative care and burnout too, which is this is a very common thing with like whether it's like taking care of sick parents or like a sick relative, where it's like you another human being is literally giving up everything to do that, and there is a burnout that happens. Like other countries, they have like you know palliative care people to help. It's part of like, you know for universal healthcare. Here, it costs us a fuck ton of money, so you have people that like you know you read about like when people kill like the elderly all the time, it's like the most murder, like one of those murder groups of people. It's because like this palliative burnout where it's like these old people are dying and they think it's murder, but it's again, it's like, what else can you do? It's just this really odd thing. And that is something he's commenting on that's actually like pretty brilliant too, because that is like an actual phenomenon that exists. And that's not you being an asshole. That's just the freaking truth. It's real. Like it's sad.
Well, we cut to Sally and Franklin and they're bickering and they're really worried. It's now pitch black out. We are lit by the headlights of their van and this really great blue lighting kind of cast upon them. And the blue lighting, I think, is really effective and really well executed. And they're bickering about should we go find them? Franklin wants to stay there or leave. And Sally says, I'm not leaving without Jerry. They're honking the horn, calling out, and she says, I'm just going to go. And Franklin, you know, no, don't leave me. Let's just wait. And, you know, he says, I'll honk the horn one more time. And then if they don't come, we'll leave. And he goes to honk the horn and realizes they don't have the keys to the van, which I just realized, how did they even turn the headlights on if they don't have keys? Holy shit.
Also, doesn't your horn still work without the keys in, or am I making that up?
I think older cars that did actually work. I think I remember my old Corolla, you could still turn the lights on and beep the horn.
You know what? Yeah, there's probably a knob for the lights specifically. Yeah, all right, great. Movie not ruined for me. So Sally says, this is enough. I'm going to go find them. And Franklin refuses. And she says, you can come with me or not. And then so she is not waiting for him and walks off. And he says, fine, I'm coming, and starts following her. And so it's a long shot, you know, where she turns around and starts to help him and push him through overgrowth and branches. Is this like what they call a thicket? Is this a briar patch?
Yeah.
It's a tangle of these really beautiful dead looking trees with that blue light like cast upon them. And Franklin has a flashlight that shines bright white. And I really love the juxtaposition between the bright white circle of his flashlight with the blue surrounding it throughout all of these shots. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
They see a light in the distance and it looks like a house, and they're getting closer, and she's really struggling to push him through all of this overgrowth. She says, this is impossible. And she's struggling, and he says, Sally, I hear something. Stop. And he shines his flashlight in the direction of the camera, which then directs our attention to one side of the frame. And then suddenly it cuts to Leatherface with the flashlight on him on the other side of the frame. Tobe Hooper specifically averted our eyes to the left and revealed Leatherface on the right a lot in this movie. Sally screams and Franklin is doomed. Leatherface's chainsaw is going, and he digs into his torso with it. And the blood splatter here, I think is really conservative, but I like that. It doesn't look like too little, and it's certainly not too much. It's just there.
Yeah. And the sound sells it too.
Yeah, for sure. And her screaming, I cannot imagine what the shit that they put her through. And her having to scream nonstop. I also think she has a scream that we don't get tired of hearing.
Yeah, true.
You know,
Yeah.
she changes it so often throughout. She has almost different screams for what she's running from or what's going on. And I think that really helps. I fucking love her performance in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I think There are some really great performances in this movie, actually. So anyway, all right. Franklin is done. Sally runs and is running through this, I guess we're calling it a thicket moving forward, and her hair is getting caught and she can't move super fast. In reality, Gunnar Hansen was a faster runner than her. Now he was already like 6'1", I think, and had on 3-inch heels to make him even bigger with this real chainsaw with the chain on it. They didn't take the chain
Season
off.
16 who? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Wait, say that again?
Drag Race season 16.
Totally.
3-inch heels chainsaw. Come on.
Surprised it hasn't been done already. So in order to not catch up with her too fast, he made acting choices of cutting branches around him. And I just think it adds, almost cutting those branches around him makes him seem even bigger, right? She's almost like a small little mouse who can get through this quicker. And he's this giant, like whatever animal chases mice, you know? A giant cat. Yeah.
A Jack Russell Terrier.
There are a couple shots where he's like right on her tail. I think it's great pacing. It's a really long chase sequence where you can't see where you're coming from and you can't see where you're going, but it never gets boring to me. And I think that's really important to note. At a point, she starts crawling under some of this growth. And so she sees the house in the distance. She runs up the back steps, bangs on the porch. Nobody runs. So then she runs around to the front of the house, gets in, closes the door behind her, and books it up the stairs. Leatherface behind her takes his chainsaw and starts cutting through the front door of the house. He was high on marijuana for the first time in his entire life when he filmed the scene. Apparently everyone was stoned a lot like during the making of this, and he had never indulged before and decided to do it. I think this was the last thing that they filmed, was him cutting the door, and sincerely regretted it because he had never been high, didn't know what to expect, and now he's handed a chainsaw in heels with wood splinters flying through the air. He also, at a point, because of the heels, banged his head on a door frame and knocked himself out cold.
Fuck.
Yeah. All right. So Sally has run up the stairs. She finds this room and it's lit by like a floodlight. It's just this tiny, weird shaped room. And in the back of it is a decrepitly old man in a rocking chair. And she kind of like falls down at his feet and is screaming, "You got to help me. You got to help me." And then realizes that his rocking chair is facing a chair with the corpse of an old woman in it, who is presumably grandma. What are your guys' thoughts on this makeup design? Because it took them 9 hours to put it on.
I think for like, probably I'm guessing the materials they had and stuff, it's a little clunky, but like I'm along for the ride. It's but I know they're trying to like make him look like in between a corpse or like giving it like a supernatural element, because when he drinks her blood a little bit, it kind of like comes back to life, like he like did a bump or something. It's like, oh, here we are. But like it's interesting.
Yeah, I saw the movie was made for like $60,000, and I know you said you love the calculation of like how that would be today, and I'm like curious what that would be today.
So I'll just tell the mafia who backed this movie.
Yeah,
I think it was Bryanston Pictures. It was a front, allotted them 60 grand, and they ended up needing up to somewhere between 80 and 140,000. It's completely unclear because all of the money was fumbled with this company who lied to them and told them that it had only made $1 million when it made something like $80 million. Like, this movie was the biggest independent film until Halloween 4 years later, which then took that spot.
Oh, shit.
I can't believe they would do that.
Said with sincerity, question mark. Which is why they only, I think they gave them, the company gave them $10,000 to spread across paying everybody. Like 9 months after they wrapped, people got their paychecks. And like I said, the guy who played the hitchhiker only got like $28.
Oh my God.
Allegedly. That's the story. All right. So grandpa's obviously going to be no help. She runs back down the stairs, but Leatherface is busted through the door. And I love this moment because she screams and actually scares him. He kind of like jumps back and swings the saw a little bit, and then chases after her. And she doesn't waste a second before she jumps out of a second-story window and falls to the ground. And I actually love that primal instinct of like if my house is on fire, that's what I'm gonna do, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's something that's like missing in horror movies, that sort of primal instinct, that visceral like
Yeah.
flight or fright or flight or fight response. And I think that's what this movie does well, is like the immediate like flight response.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just like scream and like don't move, and it's like, no, you would run. Like you would run and
Yeah.
jump out the second story window.
I think she lies in like the canon of horror of Final Girls in like a very heralded place because she fights back. She doesn't really get any punches in. She doesn't really hurt anybody, but like she does not stop trying to get away, you know? And her instincts are great. You know, she might jump out a window and it might take her a few seconds to get up, but she's getting up and she's running again, you know?
And it really feels like what it would be like if you have adrenaline kicking in and you're just like doing those, yeah, instinctual primal actions and behaviors. Because I mean, I think like so many horror movies today, like the reactions are like so like subdued and like odd sometimes, and people see things that I'm like, I would be flipping the fuck out and
Mhm.
like screaming, or at least just like in shock. But it's like people are just like wide-eyed and like ooh, and it's like no, when you see things like this where it's like you're being chased in the middle of this like unknown place by this crazy person and you're gonna like scream your fucking head off and jump through a window, it just feels so much like more raw and like
Yep.
animalistic, which is what makes it like that much scarier.
And all with bell bottoms on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which are probably a little hard to run in. I feel like it's probably slapping against her calves a little bit, you know?
Maybe
Or
Leatherface is
like,
trying to cut them off and turn them into Daisy Dukes like Pam had.
Right. Yeah. Pam looked great in those.
Had an eye for her. Had an eye for him.
All right, so she stands up, starts running again through the thicket, and as she's trying to stand up, Leatherface is looking out the window with his chainsaw down at her. I just think it's a really cool thing. And then she books it, and he comes out the door and starts running after her again. This time it's a little bit of like a faster sprint, but she does run headfirst into a branch and fall on her back, and she's knocked out for like 2 seconds and has to get back up. And of course, she was making like distance between her and Leatherface, but now he's right behind her again. And she keeps going, comes across the gas station from before, and makes it into the front door of the gas station and kind of spills in, right? And as soon as she opens that door, the chainsaw stops. It's a really interesting single shot that glides from right to left where he's behind her along the side of the building, and he turns the corner too, but then as soon as he's out of frame, we don't see him again. And in my mind, it tells me like he's maybe not allowed there. Like that is, quote, the old man's space, right? And he's called the old man. He looks like he could be their father. He is actually a brother. That's three brothers in this family,
Oh.
which is unclear, but that's what the script wrote. And so the old man who runs the gas station from before, who told them not to go, you know, messing around, is trying to calm her down. And she's in hysterics for obvious reasons. She's begging him, call the police, you know, like he killed Franklin, he killed Jerry, and I don't know what's happening. And he says, we don't have a phone here. So I'm going to have to go to the nearest town. He says, I'm going to go get the truck. He goes out to get the truck, and she starts to like not calm down, but just stop screaming and looks over at all the meat cooking in like the barbecue pit. And I love it. Like, it doesn't look like human flesh, but it resembles the shape of like a torso.
Yeah.
You know, and then the radio, which was playing country music, now is talking about the corpses being defiled again. And she starts to put it together in her mind at the same time that we put it together in our mind that these are fucking people.
mm-hmm.
Like they're selling human barbecue at this gross old gas station.
Oh.
Do you think you've ever accidentally, in the many years of fast food, isn't there like a study shown that like there's like a small percentage of human flesh in like fast food or something crazy like that?
It wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't surprise me either. There's genuine, like there's no way to know exactly what you're putting in your body when it comes to that. I love my Taco Bell, like don't get me wrong, but I don't know where the fuck it comes from. I know there is like a certain amount of like rats or mice that like fall into the grinder or whatever, you know, like pests that we consume unknowingly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about don't pick up a hitchhiker, pay artists for their work, and I think the third one is like don't eat meat, but yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, we're learning lessons here. So she has realized they've been eating humans, It's implied, it's not told, but it's still obvious. And I think it's brilliant. The truck pulls up and the old man gets out and he's carrying a burlap bag and a rope. And he's got this weird, gross smile on his face. Sally says, "What are you doing?" And it starts to come together for her that he's in on it. He says, "You don't need to worry, just cooperate. We'll have no trouble." And she picks up a carving knife, like for the meat, you know, like she's a fucking fighter. But he grabs a broom and whacks it out of her hand, and he starts whacking her with this broom. And it doesn't look like it would do a lot of damage, but I think it's shot in a way where it's like he just kind of ambushes it with her and it throws her off. I don't know. She falls down, the broom handle breaks, and he keeps hitting her, and he eventually knocks her out and ties her up, like ties her hands around her back.
There's something very Eleanor Roosevelt about him too.
Something. Yeah, I'll take that. He gives a very genuine character performance. I think he's deeply scary. I think he's maybe scarier than the hitchhiker to me.
Yeah. That's Eleanor Roosevelt for you. First lady.
Right. Carries her to the truck, and then I love this. He realizes that the gas station door is open, so he starts the truck, stops it, gets out, closes the door, turns off the light, gets back in the truck, starts it, and says something like, "Oh, the cost of electricity is going to drive a man out of business." He's very sensible, right? He tries to speak sensibly throughout all of this and in a very matter-of-fact way. And as he's driving, Sally's crying, and he's taking this broken broom handle and he's like just poking her with it. She's kind of like curled up in the passenger seat, burlap sack over her face, and he's just taunting her with it. But he's saying things like, "We'll be there in a little bit. Everything's going to be fine. Like, you don't have to worry." And the scene goes on and on and on for longer than you want it to. It goes from uncomfortable to being kind of gross.
Yeah, it's so like how I imagine, I don't know. Again, this is going back to like a vegetarian thing. It's like I feel like that's like someone like treating like a pig or something going off to slaughter. Like we're gonna be, I don't know. Like you just talk to the animal. I don't know. Yeah, there's something there.
Oh yeah, they're definitely being treated like animals.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
So they're driving up to the house. It looks terrifying in pitch black. I think it's a really honest shot where it's not overlit. It's not lit at all. All that you see is like the lights in the houses and the faintest of like moonlight behind it. And he drives past the hitchhiker and calls, what does he call him? Like a nap-haired idiot, and gets out and screams at him and says, "I told you to stay away from those graveyards. And, you know, nobody caught me." And he gets a beating. Like he gets his ass kicked. The hitchhiker does, by his much older brother. Jumps into the back of the truck and they pull up to the house. I think my favorite moment of the entire movie is when the old man gets out, takes Sally out of the car, and he walks in the door and says, "Look what your brother's done to the door." And he goes on and on and on about it. Leatherface kind of timidly walks out of the red room, and he's got on his old lady mask now, and an apron, and like he's trying to be domestic, right?
Julia Child style.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's totally Julia Child, especially at 6 foot, whatever. She gets set in a chair and the hitchhiker pulls her burlap sack off. And there's a great moment where she realizes that it's him from before and that he was in on it as well. Starts screaming, and Leatherface is accosted by the old man saying, "Did you let any of the other kids get away, you damn fool?" Leatherface makes these like gibberish noises where he's communicating, "No, I didn't." And then the old man has to yell at him for something. So then he goes back to, "You damn fool, you've ruined the door," and starts hitting him again. They go upstairs to bring Grandpa down. And I think this movie takes its time when it needs to, because it takes him a minute to carry him down the stairs, and we see the entire thing. He is set at the table, and the old man's trying to comfort Sally, which is not going to work. They shove a dirty rag in her mouth and tie a rope around it, and this rag was actually legitimately used at craft services to wipe all of the like food that they had been eating off of the table. So she's literally got like gross rotting food in her mouth on this rag. Yeah,
I like appreciate like the wanting to get the thing you want as a filmmaker. You know what I mean? You want to get the reaction you want. Like why? Like come on.
Yeah, it's also
like, you didn't have to do that.
It's called acting.
Yeah,
you know,
she was hired for a specific reason. Like you just, I don't know. And just knowing that the rotting flesh of like the 100-degree temperature in Texas with the windows blacked out. Oh, anyway, sorry.
No, I think it was Nicolas Cage who made a movie, and he was supposed to play a character who was exhausted. And so he stayed awake for like 2 days straight to do this. And he couldn't remember his lines, and he was fucking everything up. And his very famous co-star, I can't remember who it was, just looked at him and said, sometimes you just need to act. And I think that, like, you know, it's acting.
Oh, yeah.
So she's
hadn't slept for 2 days. I love that story.
Yeah, sure. That's what it was. All right. So they set Grandpa up across from Marilyn, and they grab her finger and kind of hold it toward him. And Leatherface takes a blade and slices her finger open and places it in Grandpa's mouth, who then starts suckling on it like it's a tit. And it's gross. Oh my God, it's so weird. And she's just screaming nonstop. They're holding a razor blade to her throat while she's doing this. The hitchhiker is, and then she passes out. And when she comes to, we hear flies buzzing, and we see like a dead chicken on the table in front of her, another dead armadillo. There's like a cow skull, and then a close up on Grandpa's face. And he just does this like weird twitch of his cheek, and it's enough to set her screaming. And we get these incredible multi-angle cuts all around, close-ups on her eyeballs, close-ups on her, bizarre distorted sounds happening in the background while she's settling into the situation that she's now in. She's tied to a chair, and a downward shot from the ceiling shows when she starts trying to struggle that the arms of the chair are actual human arms that she's tied to. And everyone is sitting at the table. So it's the hitchhiker, the old man, and Leatherface, who is now dressed for dinner in his pretty woman mask, like his pretty lady mask. And this is the one that's got makeup on it.
Yeah, like what can't she do? That's a 3-in-1.
Really?
Like,
yeah.
Like seriously, season 16.
Here we go. Queen.
And also now all those family members are now all elected officials in Texas. So like they really worked their way up.
Oh my God, you're not wrong. So they're taunting her, and she's crying, and they start howling like dogs. And old man, there's like a bickering between old man and you know, it turns out that he actually doesn't like to do any of the killing. Like the hitchhiker tells him, you're the cook, you can't do anything, you can't do no killing. And they get this idea, why don't we let Grandpa have some fun? Let's let Grandpa kill her. You always told me Grandpa was the best. And the old man starts kind of comforting her and saying, he never misses, he always gets them in one strike. And she's screaming like, you can make them stop, please. And God, there's this moment where she looks at them and she says, I'll do anything, like, let me do anything. And this despair of her face, of like knowing what that entails, is so visceral. I mean, this was a scene where they shot for 27 hours straight, and we get these bizarre facial expressions from them, reactions, screams. They get up in her face and just like poke at her and kind of like play with her hair, and it's just gross, you know?
Yeah, now with that like context, I'm gonna like rewatch it. I mean, I knew about the rotting flesh and stuff, but the 27 hours thing, that's a lot.
Yeah, it described as like I think it's sanity slipping, where you do just kind of start to lose it, you know?
Oh yeah, that is
like torture. That's like torture, you know, to have to be in this scene, in this setting for that long, in 100+ degree heat.
I'm sure it also breaks down that awareness of like the camera being there, and that like facade of like acting, where it's like getting to a point where you just like don't even care, so that it's like that more like, yeah, like primal behavior. And at that point, it's like the camera is just a fixture in the room and you're losing your fucking mind. And so, yeah, it's like, I think it contributes to it being a much more like raw feeling moment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. How could you not go crazy in a place like that, you know? So the hitchhiker runs upstairs, brings like a metal bucket, like a giant vat, and sets it at Grandpa's feet. And then he unties Sally and holds her head over it. And Leatherface is trying to hand Grandpa this sledgehammer, and he can't hold it because he's on the verge of, he's on death's door. Like this decrepitly old murderer can't hold it. So he tries to hit her in the head and misses. And then he gets her lightly, and there's kind of like multiple almost hits. And then he gets one really good one in her, and it shows the back of her head, and it looks gnarly. It's a really pretty good effect, I think. She's screaming and screaming and trying to get away. Grandpa gets her a couple more times, and then the hitchhiker, who's holding her down, gets overexcited and he says, "Let me do it. I want to kill her." And he reaches for the hammer. And when he reaches away and kind of like lets go of his grasp, she gets out. She gets out of his grasp and runs, and she jumps out of her second window of the day, plants it on the ground outside, and the sun's starting to come up. And her facial reaction when she looks up, she has this like maniacal primal look on her face of like, maybe what are my options here, right? Like, where can I go next? And slowly, she's hurt bad, guys.
It's like when we left Winter Party in Miami. I didn't want to get out. It was sunlight out. I was like, I can't anymore.
Oh no.
It's gonna hurt us. All right, go on.
She starts to hobble, and her hobbling turns into a really bad run, but she's doing what she can. And the hitchhiker busts out the door, and he's got his razor blade, and he's slicing toward her back, and he's laughing. And then we hear the chainsaw start up, and Leatherface runs out the door behind the both of them. So she makes it to the road. The hitchhiker gets close enough with his razor blade. He starts slicing her back with it, and grabs onto her at a point in the middle of the road and just starts slicing at her back. And a giant like semi-truck, like an 18-wheeler, rushes up toward them. She gets out of his grasp and runs, and the hitchhiker is flattened, like pancaked by this 18-wheeler. Have you ever seen the behind the scenes footage of how they did this?
No.
It's I'm not joking, like perfect cutaway of the truck hitting a standing dummy, like of him standing there, and then cutting to the truck hitting a standing dummy, because you don't see the transition in the movie.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so he gets run over by like all four sets of wheels that this thing has. It comes to a stop. Leatherface is chasing Sally. The driver of this semi gets out and is running to help. I love him so much. Running to help Sally. Leatherface comes around the corner, and he like turns around and books it back to the cab of his truck. He puts Sally in first. He climbs in and closes the door, right? They climb out of the other side of the cab. He grabs a wrench before he gets out of it, and Leatherface is coming after them. He throws the wrench at Leatherface, and it whacks him in the head. He falls down, and his chainsaw lands on his thigh. And this scene was done. They had a metal plate over his thigh, and then they had a piece of meat under his jeans or under his pants. And so when you hear Leatherface yell out in pain, that's actually Gunnar Hansen screaming, because the chainsaw was warming up and heating up the metal plate, that it was burning his leg.
That's wild.
We filmed in Death Drop Gorgeous. I didn't know this is actually a good parallel too. We're filming that. I had a piece of plexiglass between my stomach and the prosthetic, and it looked like shit. So we took the plexiglass out. So it was just between the actual electric turkey carver, which with real blades, the fake guts, and my actual stomach. So we told Ninny this, and Ninny, the actress, Ninny Nothing, freaked out. She's like, "I'm not gonna do this." So like, it was kind of like we convinced her to do it. I was like, you know what? We've been filming for 12 hours. I don't care if you actually cut me, just do it. But luckily, I didn't get cut. But like, yeah, that's wild.
That's nuts. That scene. I was actually wondering about how you achieved that, because it looks really good.
Oh, thank you.
It's so gross.
I can't believe they had his actual leg in there with just a piece of metal and some meat.
Yeah. Guerrilla filmmaking. A pickup truck drives toward the scene, and the truck driver just runs down the road, and we never see him again. I'm assuming he makes it. That's the life I want for him.
Same.
The pickup truck stops, and Sally is trying to climb in the back, and she's injured and has trouble, and the truck also won't start immediately, and Leatherface is gaining on her, injured. He's hobbling with his chainsaw. She finally gets in, like right at the last minute, and the driver starts the car and books it away. And I think this is perhaps the most perfect ending of any horror movie of all time.
Yeah.
Sally, soaked in blood, like Carrie at the prom, is in the back of the pickup truck, watching Leatherface laughing and screaming at the same time. And it's a fucking remarkable moment. Just this laugh scream that she has. And Leatherface, in frustration, swings his chainsaw around. It's almost balleric a little bit. And it's kind of like the background of like the rising Texan sun, the golden yolk spilling over these fields, and this gorgeous shot of this fucking crazy person wearing the face of a woman spinning around in circles with its chainsaw, and then cut to black instant.
What I
Credits
love
roll.
about this,
So
what's
good.
nice about that too is I feel like a lot of modern horror movies do this too, where it's like they have to do a follow up. Like, did she make it back home? It's like, who fucking cares? Like, I love the idea. It's like, no, we're ending it now. Like the shock of just that abrupt ending. Like, who knows? Like, obviously, she's gonna make it back home. She's gonna like have to be in therapy the rest of her life. Like, there's all these things. A good example of that is like The Descent. So
Yeah.
the original Descent, the original ending they had was she has the birthday cake in front of her and she's hallucinating, trapped in the caves. And American test audiences hated it. So they went back and had to do this scene where it's like she's driving home and then sees a ghost in the truck and blah, blah, makes it. It's just like I know there's something about that. The ending of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just like perfect. Like we don't need to know anything else. Like we know things are gonna suck for her. Like
Yeah.
stop right here.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And she's going to go to the police. So they're going to, this family's caught. One of them's dead.
Didn't like the new one make her like some like rogue agent thing? Like she just like I don't
The
I don't
new
know
one
why.
treated this character so poorly. So Marilyn Burns, who played the character, passed away unfortunately a
Right.
number of years ago. And so the actress who played her in this reboot, requel, whatever, she was in Mandy. She was like one of the psychedelic evil people in Mandy with Nicolas Cage.
Mhm.
And yeah, she's like this gruff old like Southern woman now who wears like Sheryl Crow straw cowboy hats, and she's been waiting for Leatherface, and he finally shows up. And there is a moment that I think they've really missed the landing on when she wants to approach him and be like, you have haunted my dreams forever, and then she realizes like he doesn't even remember her. He has no idea who she is. And I think that would have been an interesting moment in better hands. This trauma that she's carried her whole life, and she's nothing to him.
Right. He
It really looks like one of those like yuppie turquoise moms used to harass me at Whole Foods.
Yeah, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I know this woman.
Yeah. Yeah. She's never touched a gun. There's a lot of turquoise.
Yeah. I thought I hate that she used the young women as bait for Leatherface, and then she gets cut in half in a pile of garbage. And it's just really bad handling of this character that we all wished had returned. But anyway,
it's coming back to me now. Yeah.
Sorry for the flashbacks.
Terrible. No, it was an interesting choice, especially given on the heels of like how they made Laurie Strode in her old age, and she's like some expert like ex-war seemingly, even though she wasn't in the war. I don't know. It's just a choice. It's a very loud choice.
It comes up on almost every episode how much I hate the David Gordon Green trilogy of Halloween.
Oh, same.
Except, guys, controversial hot take: Halloween Ends. I'm kind of into it as its own unit, like as its own. It's not good. I get it. It's a bad fucking movie, but I didn't hate it as much as the first two.
Personally, I think it should have ended when the kid hit the floor in the beginning. Credits should have rolled.
8 minutes in.
Like, that would have been the best.
I just ordered Trick or Treat Studios is releasing Corey Cunningham's scarecrow mask that he wears at the party. His cute little. I just ordered that. I need to stop spending money on this shit. So, all right, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Here on Rick or Treat Horrorcast, there's a rating system. This is probably a waste of time. I feel like I know what you guys are going to say. A movie's either a trick, which means it's all right. It's a treat, which means you love it, or it's a smell my feet, which means it sucked. How would you rate the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Brandon?
Definitely like a hard trick.
What? Hard trick?
That's good. I mean, I'm sorry, hard treat. Sorry, a really hard treat.
I mean, I've had some hard tricks in my life, but hard trick.
I've had some hard treats too.
Yeah, Ryan, what about you?
Also hard treat. Yeah.
Extra hard treat. It's I think it's so great in so many ways, as we've discussed, but just has inspired us as filmmakers, especially when we're just making our friends do terrible things for us in the name of cinema.
Right, in the name of art. I
mean, one of the things that like I love about it too is that like, I mean, going back to the whole discussion of, Franklin, which I think his character could tie into this, or like the camera angles or the gross sets and everything, is that like you are uneasy from start to finish. And in a way that like a lot of modern films, they sort of work this contrast in, which often like sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. Of like the first part of the film is like glamorous life of like, you know, four hot couples go on vacation and everything's super cool and poppy, and then like everything like descends into like craziness maybe, or there's like a killer and it gets dark, whatever. But like this, I mean, like from having Franklin as like this fifth person in the group who's like making you annoyed from the beginning, and then you have, you know, the weird hitchhiker, and you have the opening scene, of course.
Yeah.
Like everything, like you're never feeling like, oh, this is a glamorous little fun road trip to Texas. It's like there's at no moment where I feel happy. You know,
Yeah.
it's like gross and like, yeah, it's just like it's an excellent like execution of just maintaining that throughout the film. So
That's what I think. I know it's classified as a slasher, but I think it transcends slasher. I really don't think it is. The folk horror thing that I can't remember who said that makes more sense to me, but I think it's something like into its own. I think it's definitely American folk horror. Again, maybe just folk horror. I don't know. It's definitely in its own little world and class. I think like we complain all the time about like slasher films having off-screen kills and this lack of gore, and it gets like these movies are so fucking basic and boring. I don't know why you wouldn't have gore in a slasher, but again, like I feel like this movie has no gore, and it's not really a slasher, but it's like it's super effective of having like off-screen kills and like just very like suggested gore, and like you know it's interesting. I think like studios spend a lot of money trying to emulate like what they captured in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, what they've captured in Halloween, and they're just not getting it. And I think it's like you said, it's like a time capsule, and it's best just to leave this shit alone.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think that's absolutely the perfect way to describe it. In casual conversation, if I'm talking to a non-horror fan, I might use the word slasher, but if I'm going to talk to three professionals who are just as obsessed with the genre as I am for literally 2.5 hours about this, then you know I'm gonna it is its own. It's its own, and nothing has ever been able to compare to it. And I think it's because nowadays films they're overthought, they're overanalyzed, they're overstudied. You know, markets are overstudied, and this movie is just one of a kind. For sure. Well, listen, I cannot thank you guys enough for taking this time. I've kept you far too long. Will you please let my listeners know where they can stalk you and where they can watch your films?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all on social media. If you search for Death Drop Gorgeous or Saint Drogo or Monster Makeup Productions, it'll show up. And then you'll probably find our own personal account somewhere linked into things. Death Drop Gorgeous is pretty much everywhere. If you're looking for a John Waters campy slasher with some drag queens, you just want to have a good time with your friends. It's on Shudder, it's on Tubi. I know it's available on other things as well. If you want to avoid like Tubi ads in the middle of the movie. St. Drogo is currently at Cinema Q in Denver in August, and as well as Popcorn Frights in August. But if you follow the movie's page, we'll be keeping up to date where you can watch it.
We'll be in Soho in late November as well too.
Oh yeah, if anyone in the UK is listening, we'll be in Soho Horror in November as well.
Brilliant. I do have UK listeners, so go check it out. I can't recommend these films enough. You guys have been incredible. It's been great to meet you and great to spend this time with you. Thank you for being so generous with your time. Listeners, you can check out my writing and more about the podcast at www.rickrtreat.com and follow the pod on @rickrtreatpod on Instagram. I'm probably going, I was just about to return to Twitter, and then they did this whole like new marketing dead bird thing. So
the X.
Yeah, the X. I don't want to do it.
I don't want to do it either, but like I'm in this weird thing where it's like I'm so fearful of like when something's so big and so many people are so addicted to it, is it ever going to fail? Like I know Blue Sky and Threads were happening, but are people actually really moving to that? No, exactly. So like what is going to need to happen for Twitter? I don't know. Exactly. Sorry.
Unfortunately, I've never been a Twitter person ever, but I started it for my podcast and then I deleted it. And, but I don't know. Yeah. It's for marketing and, getting the word out there. Even for my writing as a writer, it's useful.
Absolutely.
As an actor, like, hello, like I don't know.
It's the networking that we've experienced, I think, for our movies and our production on Twitter is far surpassed like the networking we could ever do on Instagram or Facebook, which is so frustrating. And when Death Drop premiered, it was during COVID, it was 2020. So every festival we got into went virtual. And so we got to interact with people in live time as they're watching it from their homes. And that was a vital asset. And so it's very disappointing to watch it just like slowly crumbling before our eyes.
I think people remember too with Twitter is like smash that mute and block button and like make it curtail it to the shit you want to see. I mean, they're gonna pummel you and inundate you with the worst people and the worst shit. Just block it all. I have everyone blocked. I don't care. My Twitter feed's been so much more pleasant lately. People I block will come back. Like for some reason, Ben Shapiro was back in my feed. I don't know how that little fucking ferret made its way back in, so I just reblocked him. But like you can get rid of these people. And I have so much more horror content and just awesome shit in my feed now. So just don't be afraid. Smash those buttons. So many great people I've met through Twitter. Unfortunately, it's going to take the total collapse of the entire platform before people actually like venture on to Blue Sky and Threads. I'm on Blue Sky and I fucking love it. It's such a more pleasant experience. Like everyone in my feed is people I'm friends with. And there's no fucking bullshit. When people are acting like assholes, they're quickly called out and dealt with. And there's like no more. There's not bots everywhere. So it's like pleasant. But like again, like Mike was saying too, it's like the majority of people like us have to utilize these platforms for networking because we don't have giant budgets to hire marketing teams and agents and shit. So you kind of have to work with what you got.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap this up. Thank you all very much for listening. Thank you, fellas. Thank you, fellas, for taking the time, and we'll see y'all later, Spookies.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. We had a blast.
Awesome.
Toodles.
Thanks for coming Rick or Treating. You can follow the show on Instagram at Rick or Treat Pod. It'd be a real scream if you'd take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. The show's spooky intro and outro music is a cover of Camille Saint-Saëns' Danse Macabre, with orchestrations composed and performed by Lestat von Monlicht. Links to the artist's music can be found in the episode description. Check him out, he's frighteningly talented. Rick or Treat Horrorcast is independently produced by me, Ricky J. Duarte of Rick or Treat Productions. If you like what you heard, tell a friend. If you didn't, well, they're coming to get you, listener.